Let us pray. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of the people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons die nodige wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelele Eliswe letu nabantu balo omasile ukulunga kipondo letu. Nkosi sikelele I Afrika tina abantuano bayo kokela inkokeli zayo yenike ukolo I Afrika. All this we beg in your holy name. Amen. Order. Good afternoon, honourable members. Today we'll be using, as usual, the hybrid model for the sitting of the House. We have honourable members here present in the chamber with the presiding officer and our table staff, and we welcome all those members who are online with us. And we trust that these members are all able to connect. Please may I ask that once again you keep your microphones on mute and that you raise your hand should there be a point of order. What I'd also like to say is just to remind everybody that the same privileges apply during this hybrid sitting. There are language translation services which are available both in the chamber as per normal and on Microsoft Teams. And please, honourable members participating in the sitting of the House must please access those via a second device as you have been doing. And if you have any problems, please to contact the ICT colleagues who are able to assist honourable members. As ruled by the presiding officer in the sitting on the House on the 23rd of April 2020, no interjections shall be permitted during the debate. In this regard, I also wish to draw the attention of honourable members to Rule 40 of our standing rules. I now recognise the Chief Whip.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Notwithstanding the provisions of Rule 20, subsection 1, I move that precedence be given to the debate and order of the day.
Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections? Agreed to. We will now proceed to the subject for discussion. In the name of honorary Christians, as printed on the order paper, I recognise the honorary Christians.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the debate for discussion today is a very serious one, namely illegal land invasions and land grabs. This illegal land grabs and land invasions is not only affecting the Western Cape, but this is a nationwide problem. Gauteng Community Safety MEC said, stop the invasion of our farms in the province, saying that the land grabs is a problem that hurts white farmers as well as black farmers. 3 MECs here in the province, MEC for Human Settlements, MEC for Community Safety, and MEC for Local Government. After the invasion of land in Wallerstein, Blukenroos, and Kailicha, they were calling the leading figures in this invasions to be arrested, and we echo that sentiment. Action must be taken, and action must be taken soon. There is a spike of land grabs in the province. The other day I was in the Overberg area, and you see the land grabs well planned and well orchestrated. Between April and July 2020, law enforcement officers in the city of Cape Town alone has responded to 260 illegal land invasions. But we as the ACDP, we believe in the rule of law. But we're asking law enforcement agencies to evict and remove these invaders in a humane way. Speaker, I'm asking the question, where are we heading as a country and where are we heading as a province? The ACDP recognize that South Africa is in a critical juncture in history with severe social, economic, and political challenges. But this is no excuse to break the law. People have lost confidence in national government and its inability to give clear direction and policy certainty. And hence, this contributes to the lawlessness of this country and also this province. We are in dire need for political leadership to solve the serious political issues in our country and in our province. And I want to mention that my leader, Reverend Kenneth Mesue, who is a committed leader, a reliable leader, a trustworthy leader, and a God-fearing leader, says that we need to attend to all the needs of all of our people in our province and our country. Under his leadership, the ACDP has a strong vision to see a healthy and prosperous nation. Yes, South Africans, we have hope in this country, we have hope in this province. And Edmund Burke, and I quote, he said, "Evil thrives when good people do nothing," close quote. South Africa and this province, there are many, many good people, and they should not leave this country because there's hope for this country. But unlike Deputy Speaker, we have the leader of the EFF, Mr. Julius Malema, who thinks they're above the law. They think with their actions they're above the law. With their despicable behavior in Parliament, and now the latest Clicks debacle, and the incitement when it comes to land grabs, we believe they should face the full arm of the law. Examples must be made, otherwise this will get out of control. They've already tarnished the decorum of Parliament, and clearly they don't belong there. The ACDP is committed in seeing genuine change and a renewal in our country that is modeled on a value-based norms with integrity, with justice, honesty, and respect. We ask you today, where is the respect? Where have we gone wrong? And when you see the incitement of the Red Berets, we know where we went wrong. And I believe next year, 2021, the EFF will come to their fall because of leading our people astray. As I said, Deputy Speaker, land invasion is a sore issue. When you go to the townships and you speak to the gogo sitting there, she's a proud homeowner. When you go to the townships,
Finish off.
Okay, I'll close off, Deputy Speaker. Of course, the ACDP has got plans for this nation, but we believe that we need decisive leadership, and that is where it starts. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Christians. I now recognise Honourable Premier Wendy.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you very much to Honourable Member Christians for putting this debate on the order paper today. And I agree with you absolutely. It's a very serious issue across our province and our country. And you said a critical juncture. I actually think, in my mind, I agree with you, it's a tipping point. We are at the verge of anarchy, and we have to make sure that we deal with this. Now, we are here in the provincial parliament, in the legislature, where we legislate and write laws. We are elected to this house, representing the people of this province. And quite frankly, we are a democracy. And a democracy can only survive if it has some bedrock foundations. And of course, those are freedom of expression, freedom of speech, the ability to raise those issues here and outside this house. But of course, for me, the most fundamental bedrock in a democracy is the rule of law and the respect for the rule of law. If I look at some of the words by Justice Mogoeng, where he talks about good governance systems that form compliance with conventional legislative and constitutional governance prescripts, the entrenchment of human rights culture, the observance of the rule of law, and giving priority to, amongst others, the realization of legitimate aspirations of the citizenry in terms of the law. And that is what we are all about, and that's why I think this is such a critical debate to be having right now. And we all need to make sure that every member in this house stands up, uses their freedoms, uses the rights being given to them through the electoral process and what they took upon themselves when they stood right here in front of this house and swore an allegiance to the Constitution of this Parliament and of this country. They need to make sure that they stand up and fight for the rule of law and for the rights of those who are being taken away by this illegal activity. And that is really critical at this moment. But of course, governments must also lead, but governments also must make sure that the institutions of state are able to do their job as well. And quite frankly, right now, what really bothers me is that we're not able to even get the institutions of state to follow through on the rule of law. So, for example, I mean, we have had to put a safety plan in place in this province. The reason we've had to put a safety plan in this province and step up even more than usual is because the national space of policing is not giving us adequate manpower and resources to deal with this tipping point, amongst many others. We stand here in this house often talking about gender-based violence and murder. That's a big driver of this plan. But it starts with littering and the basic first principles of breaking the law, speeding, those things that half of us seem to turn a blind eye to, all the way through to the real serious issues like gender-based violence. And we all condemn it here in this house. But sometimes we find some of our politicians leading the process that you've just spoken about, illegal land invasions. But before I get there, Madam Speaker, I want to talk about the policing. Now, we always know that we talk about too few policemen and women in this province, and that's why we're putting extra resources towards that. But again, Minister Fritz is engaging at a national level because we need more public order police in our province. You spoke about the 260 land invasions in the last, since July, 11th of July up until date on that report. How do you counter those land invasions? We need to be able to have the public order police to do so. Now, if we have a look at allocation of public order police, this province, which in the month of July had the most public protest in the country, the second most public protest in the country was in KZN and the third in Gauteng. But who's got the least number of public order police units? The Western Cape. There should be reallocation of even more public order police units to the provinces that need it. We have 4 units when the Eastern Cape has 7 units, or the Free State has 6 units. KZN has 7 units, and so we go on. We have 4 units. It is totally unacceptable, and we need this reallocated so that those who are not adhering to our Constitution and the rule of law can be dealt with. Madam Speaker, we also need to talk about the land invasions themselves, and the numbers are astounding. For this period last year, only in the city of Cape Town, and remember it's happening in all of our municipalities, only in the city of Cape Town they dealt with 15,000 demolitions of structures that were illegally erected. On those 260 land parcels that the Honourable Member speaks about, so far they've demolished 60,321 units. We've had 28,230 units that have been pegged out but haven't been built yet. This is nearly 100,000 illegal occupations. Now, for me, adhering to the rule of law asks for everyone to do so. And what happens is the people who suffer at the end of the day are the people in our province who adhere to the rule of law. Those people that sit on the waiting list year after year, calmly waiting, not taking to the streets, not burning of tires. It is unacceptable that they just get pushed back and back and back. And my colleague for Human Settlements will be talking about this, about how we need to rectify this and work hard to make sure we catch up. We've also got to get the economy going, because it's not only governments that can provide this. We've also got to get people to be able to provide for themselves. And now in post-COVID-19, we're in a difficult position, both in the ability from budgets for governments to provide, but at the same time, to actually get the economy going so that people can also provide for themselves. And this brings me to another point. Not only illegal land invasions, but illegal building invasions. Right now, and we will have an interpolation on this as well, on some of our buildings in our inner city, at the moment, we've got people occupying illegally the Woodstock Hospital, a site which has been identified to actually create opportunity for those people on the waiting list who wait patiently. But the illegal activity, the breaking of the law and claiming of this space. On 104 Darling Street, a National Public Works building, also illegally occupied. The Helen Bowden site, which we really want to create many opportunities for many people who deserve an opportunity by this government, illegally occupied. Fueled and pushed forward through illegal practices, not upholding the rule of law. This is unacceptable. The Circus School, the Arcadia pavement, the Al Noor building in Woodstock, and so we go on. Illegal occupation of properties that push those people in our province who deserve those spaces further back. It is unacceptable, and we have to bring this to a halt. And so, Madam Speaker, what I want to say is that specifically the members of this legislature, we get elected and we swear an allegiance to the Constitution. It is absolutely unacceptable when members in this House and members of the political parties in this House incite people to behave illegally, incite people to move on to pieces of land where land has been allocated to someone on that waiting list, and it gets that right gets taken away from them. And I agree on your point of the full might of the law needs to come in here. And if any member of this House, in this side of the House, in the ruling party side or any other, we need the rule of law to be applied, and those people need to face consequences even more severely than anybody else, because we have stood up here and signed allegiance. We are calling ourselves a democracy, when in actual fact, the founding statement of a democracy is the rule of law. We need to fight for this with everything that we've got within us, and every single person in this legislature needs to be fighting for that specific basic right and that basic foundational moment in any democracy. Because if we are at that tipping point, if we are at that juncture, to claw back if we go over the edge is almost impossible. You've got to go through absolute anarchy and riot before you come back. History has shown us that. We cannot allow this province or this country to go down that road. And every single person in this parliament needs to, in this debate, agree that we will all stand together in making sure that we do not allow illegal activity to prejudice our province, to prejudice the people in our province. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Premier Wendy. And now recognise Honourable Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, all open fields in our working class communities are targeted by land-hungry masses of our people. In Khayelitsha alone, almost all existing pockets of land have been targeted, the latest being the one in front of the Khayelitsha Magistrate Court. This has far-reaching consequences, especially for our public purse. We are on record condemning this spate of land grabs, particularly the criminal element associated with it, of people who invade land so they can sell it back to desperate people in society. There's also been talks of the companies that provide basic services to informal settlements, as well as security companies being instigators of these illegal land invasions. The government should institute an urgent investigation into the causes of these widespread coordinated invasions in the province. Where genuine concerns such as the need for housing arises, then the government should commit itself to accelerate provision of human settlements in the province. Contrary to the persistent myths that the ANC supports the ongoing spate of illegal land invasions, the ANC is vehemently opposed to the land grabs. In its 54th National Conference, the ANC clearly denounced the act and resolved that land invasions must be curbed through appropriate bylaws, which includes fast-tracking the amendment of the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act 1998 to deal with the land for housing development. These lies are often peddled by the DA when it wants to evade accountability and public scrutiny for all the pockets of land suitable for human settlements and addressing the apartheid spatial legacy that it has cheaply sold to private property developers since 2006. For a 14-year period, the DA in the Western Cape has been running roughshod over the livelihoods and rights of the land-hungry masses of our people. The capture of the DA by the private property developers has brought us to this crisis of land grabs. We have a feudal system of land ownership in the Western Cape where property developers have nobility of power over the serfs. To prove this, you have to look no further than the case of the Philippi horticulture area where the government tormented the emerging farmers, thereby threatening their livelihoods and those of their workers, and placed food security at risk. These actions have triggered untold misery for the people. Once again, the Western Cape High Court had to come to the rescue. The draconian measures of the cruel government to rezone the prime agricultural land for development was stopped by the court. The Western Cape High Court was also involved in stopping the sale of Tafelberg site to developers. At the core of the case was the charge by the activists that the state has failed to redistribute public land for housing redress in the province. This failure to redistribute land has led to antagonism and apathy that we are seeing in the working class communities towards the state. The poor have lost all the hope that the state will ever build them houses and have now resorted to the widespread land grabs. The people have seen the continual underspending and wasteful expenditure of capital budgets, especially for housing and other mega projects, and have given up on this government. This is happening in a city and a province with a violent history of land dispossession during apartheid colonialism. The implementation of the apartheid segregationist policies included the Policy Influx Control and the Group Areas Act of 1950, which saw thousands of black people removed from many suburbs. The ongoing gentrification in certain parts of the city is the continuation of these apartheid policies. The court told the provincial government and the city that in terms of Section 25 and 26 of the Constitution, they have a constitutional and statutory obligation to advance equitable access to land, realize the right to adequate housing, and to redress spatial apartheid. The court has ordered that they must comply with the obligations to address spatial apartheid and must submit a comprehensive report to the court by the 31st of May 2021, which details the steps that they have already taken to do so, the future steps they will take to do so, and when will these future steps be taken. While the DA waited for the order to do the right thing, the ANC in its 54th conference agreed that in creation of new cities and towns, planning should promote deracialization of society and development, consolidation of urban areas, and that this must include accelerating the implementation and consolidation of human settlements development legislation to utilize suitably positioned land for housing and the enforcement of existing laws and bylaws. Our call to the Premier is not to waste taxpayers' money, money by appealing the ruling. What is needed is a moratorium on the sale of all state and municipal land. We need an urgent land audit of all pockets of land owned by the provincial government and municipalities. Special focus should be paid to the Stellenbosch municipality. In its 2016 draft policy for the management of municipal agricultural land, we saw that over 1,400 hectares of land were leased. Majority of these leases commenced in April 1991 up until March 2041. Our people without land, while others are enjoying benefits of illegal apartheid land deals. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Smith. I now recognise Honourable Mseko.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, yesterday the Standing Committee for Human Settlements was brought up to speed on the devastating impacts which land invasions have on our residents, officials, projects, and ability to provide essential services. 1.3 billion rands worth of housing opportunities are currently under threat by land invasions. In Cape Town alone, these invasions deprive our residents of critical infrastructure upgrades worth 162 million to deliver one of the most basic needs, water. With these infrastructure projects under the threat, the promise of dignified sanitation and improved health will not be realized for the most vulnerable. Question, Deputy Speaker, is what does land invasion mean to Western Cape communities? It means 11,000 housing opportunities have been denied to deserving beneficiaries. It means that many housing beneficiaries who have already been on the waiting list for more than 15 years have to wait even longer. These are residents who have respected the rule of law and put their dreams on hold while projects and budgets align to their advantage. Instead of realizing this dream, they are thwarted by those who have no respect for the rule of law. These are people who think nothing of jumping the queue and holding both government and taxpayers to ransom. They prey on the desperate through shack farming, which they know will only bring people into conflict with the law. They work with political opportunists whose platform is about personal gain rather than respect for the Constitution and upholding the rule of law. The shack farmers, invasion ringleaders, and political opportunists are criminals. And I, for one, support the call for new laws in our province and municipalities which will decisively deal with such criminal elements. Deputy Speaker, it cannot be ignored that these invasions are symptomatic of an acute need for adequate housing near economic opportunities. This DA supports a vision of integrated, livable cities which will undo the damage of apartheid spatial planning. It is this vision which underpins the programs and projects of the Western Cape government. In our approach to land invasions, we must be mindful that there are real humans involved with real needs which we are duty-bound to uphold. We must be mindful of the real desperation felt by so many who simply want the security of a roof over their head and the hope of tenure that they will not have this roof removed and that they can return to the same place after a long day of work to their family and belongings. While this desperation cannot be denied, the rule of law must be upheld. Those who qualify to receive a housing opportunity and who have been on the waiting list cannot be jeopardized by invaders. Delivering housing to those who qualify to receive a housing opportunity and who are on the waiting list is a priority in the Western Cape. It must be done fairly and equitably. Violent protest and the destruction that goes along with it does nothing to deliver housing opportunities. Deputy Speaker, I applaud the excellent work, dedication, and high degree of professionalism demonstrated by our housing and security officials in grappling with this complex issue. We must remain resolute in achieving our vision of delivering housing opportunities and essential services infrastructure to deserving beneficiaries. We must not allow the sabotage of criminal land invaders and political opportunists to stop us. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Seko. I now recognise Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, what we are dealing with is a failure of supply of housing opportunities in the face of overwhelming demand. And we will not solve this by focusing on policing and security alone. It is a fundamental and inarguable fact that a human being must live somewhere. Being human means that you must live somewhere at all times. That is not a choice. At the end of the day, you must go home somewhere to eat, to sleep, and to be home. We continuously talk about rapid urbanization, and it's a phenomenon in every developing world city. But then we act surprised and outraged when land is occupied in an unplanned way. When human beings have nowhere else to be and occupy land, we are confronted by the reality that we have not planned a home for them, and we've created an environment ripe for exploitation. And when they occupy land that was meant for someone else, that disadvantages another homeless person unfairly. But it is our failure to provide an alternative that we are confronted by too. Those who exploit the homeless, the poor, and the desperate are so-called shack farming or selling access to land that they don't have any right to sell must be prosecuted for the fraud they're committing. But we must find solutions to neutralize the exploitation and to allow people to live somewhere we recognize as legitimate. The solutions do not exist if we do not acknowledge that our supply of housing is dwarfed by the demand and that everybody must live somewhere. Our supply is constrained because we act trapped by the National Housing Programme and by national grant funding. But we can find our own solutions. The pressure chamber of access to affordable housing exists across the entire income spectrum, and we will only release this pressure in a manageable way if we increase the supply of housing by both the private sector and the public sector. We must increase the supply of housing across the full spectrum of income bands. The private sector needs to develop faster, they need development approvals faster, and enhanced development rights in the right places. And in return for those enhanced development rights, they must contribute to affordable housing units. This is the very essence of inclusionary housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognise Honourable Murray from the Freedom Front.
I thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the question arises, is South Africa a failed state? There's only demands with limited supply, but nobody wants to admit it. They only demand. We had 238 land invasions, 60,644 illegal structures, a fence that even a handicapped person or a visually impaired person can cross over from Zimbabwe in pitch dark. That is our plan, how we can cope. You cannot stop a bathtub from overflowing if you refuse to close the tap. The tap comes from our neighboring states. The demand comes from neighboring states for housing. They're overflowing our borders and we does nothing to stop it. We got shack farming because we believe it's part of BEE. But I want to ask the DA, what happened to the housing waiting list where hundreds of thousands of colored people are on waiting for houses? Why does the minister say that the list, something has happened, but there is no more list? Who let the list disappear? Is that part of the DA's policy to let the list disappear mysteriously? I challenge them. Publish the list, Minister Smith. Dan Plato, publish the list of people who's on a housing waiting list for 30 years and qualifies for a house. Don't let Zimbabweans jump the queue. They jumped the queue and they got the Human Rights Commission backing them, not even knowing where they came from. Now I want to ask them, where is this list? We want to see the list. Don't queue jumping for housing. And please,
Honourable Member,
define what is a family. A naked man standing in front of a shack is not a family. He doesn't even have a wife or a child. But he's
Thank you.
entitled to a house now. A head of people is waiting for more than 30
Thank you, Honourable
years
Member.
now.
Thank you very much. I now recognise Honourable Allen.
Deputy Speaker, yesterday during the Human Settlement Standing Committee meeting, we again heard how DA-led governments has been vilified. It was court case after court case and accused of being anti-poor in its attempt to prevent continuous and orchestrated land invasions. And yet, how in the city of Johannesburg and Gauteng province, governed by the ANC, are being hailed for their decisive action in dealing with land-grabbing syndicates. Similar actions, Deputy Speaker, but different optics. We further heard on what is occurring in other metros like Buffalo City, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, and unsurprisingly, there is no sign of outrage by the National Minister of Human Settlements, Lindiwe Sisulu, or the ANC at large. Why the double standards? Deputy Speaker, now is not the time to be scoring political points. Here in the Western Cape, we direct our efforts towards finding solutions. Firstly, it is high time that all metros and local municipalities recognize and acknowledge that the problem of land invasions is worsening at the expense of the provision of dignified housing opportunities. And unless a coordinated and multi-pronged strategy is developed to address the scourge, every city and town is at risk of losing vast parcels of land to land grabbers, which serves only to lengthen the waiting time on the housing list. We can begin to see, Deputy Speaker, that if the ANC and its cohorts stop with this us and them narrative against the DA-led city of Cape Town, as well as in this province, which hinders any kind of collaboration on the problem and which is evident in the ploy to pin SAPS versus law enforcement. Members of the ANC should also be aware that the attempt to deflect blame to the EFF does not align with the reality on the ground. The fact is that members of both parties have coordinated land invasion attempts. And if the ANC truly believe what they said today, then what are they doing about their members that are invading land? Secondly, Speaker, like the Premier mentioned earlier on, the extent of land invasions and the protest action within the city of Cape Town justifies the need for public order policing members now more than ever. The Institute of Security Studies recently confirmed that the Western Cape has reached the most protest actions since the start of lockdown, between March and the end of July 2020, with the Western Cape recording 33% of all protest action within the country. However, a recent reply to a parliamentary question revealed that the Western Cape had less public order policing members than the Eastern Cape. This is not okay, Deputy Speaker. The role of POPs is mandated by the Constitution, which determined that the main functions of the service is to maintain public order. This include land invasions which more than often lead to further service delivery protests, as illegal occupiers will ultimately demand further services, mostly on land that is unserviceable. Also, it is to protect and secure the inhabitants of the Republic and their property and to uphold the law and to enforce it. Deputy Speaker, this implies that POPs maintain public order, intelligence-driven, combating and preventive operations. The additional POPs members are thus needed to supplement a wider set of policing measures and the gathering of credible intelligence so that SAPS can ultimately investigate the high flyers and the instigators to make the arrests that lead to successful prosecutions. In conclusion, Deputy Speaker, I am further taken aback by the failure of national government to correct the shortcomings of the Prevention of Illegal Eviction and Occupation Act, a request which SALGA have directed to national government over several years. These shortcomings have created an unrealistic and undue burden on the public and private landowners to protect land, which in part is fueling the process. And while I welcome the move by Minister Fritz for an increased allocation of POPs officers, I would urgently call for an investigation on the failures of the PI Act and to put an end to the ANC's hypocrisy on this matter. Here in the Western Cape, Deputy Speaker, we are solutions-driven government, and we do not respond to every political catcall, but we call on our national government where it fails in what it is due to the Western Cape. The DA will use its oversight role effectively to support the development of sustainable housing opportunities in the Western Cape without compromising the safety of residents or respondents, and one that promotes a viable use of public land in this province. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And now recognise Honourable Moran. Honourable Moran.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Good afternoon to everyone present. Deputy Speaker, land hunger is very high in the Western Cape. And this is mostly because this province thinks it is a colonial entity on its own. It is above all other people. This government do not understand the plight of the people, and it thinks it rules like an emperor. It is locked away in its high ivory tower, and it will speak and decide for all. Instead of freeing up all available public land that is idling or unused, the DA gives it to private developers, opening up all communal land or commonages to take some of the pressure away. It is not an option for the DA. These residents need land for human settlement and dignified survival. Then there are those that want to own a piece of land, take part in our economy, and use that land as a business to create wealth and to be a citizen that owns a piece of South Africa. They too want to be landowners and entrepreneurs too, despite decades and centuries of oppression. For this, we have a plan to restore land to those who were arbitrarily deprived of it by colonialists, apartheid, social engineering, or forced removers. Another plan to redistribute the land to have more people real owners of this country. In the Western Cape, too little people share the land. Some say around 2% of the province's owners are of color, which is far too little. It does not reflect the reality or demography of this province or region. Not even fraction ownership or share schemes substitute real and full ownership. Colonialists came here with a single intent: to get hold of our resources, including land to build a hospital or two for disease-ridden sailors and produce for fresh food for them, and to get cheap labor. And they even brought slaves here. They did not bring land on these wooden vessels. These colonialists caused mega farmers to control the land and dominate farming-related industries and development goals today. Is it any wonder that the DA sides with the elite farmers in their funding, even to the extent that DA fought for especially wine farmers in the lockdown period and went out of the way to legalize wine consumption and sales on the state school premises. Now that we also saw the right-wing AfriForum, disguised as a human rights group, running to the Cape High Court to so-called fight for farmers and landowners, a lobby group that is rich enough to fight its own legal and other battles. This lobby group and its partners resist all forms of restitution and reform. Even the most worthy causes are strongly opposed. In fact, they specialize in opposing anything black. They may make a few political correct gestures, but at heart, they are still trapped in the past and colonial era gone by. They long for the centuries of land dispossession and are fine with the apartheid inheritance of colonial legacy. They even try to convince us how good it is for us. While we work hard as a country to correct many years wrong, there are those that want to use the impatience against us. Not before, during lockdown, or after it, shall South Africa allow people to grab others' property in perpetuating the evil apartheid colonialism by misguided actions. The rule of law must prevail. We will not permit illegal actions by those who are encouraged by people with ulterior motives. If you do not follow the legal route, you will be dealt with by the law. Don't cry after. All are warned in advance. Those that incite others will be unmasked, publicly exposed, and dealt with by the police. No excuses. Don't jump the queue and do not abuse other people. Instead, all must remain calm and make sure they have raised the interest at the relevant department, land or agriculture, and municipalities where the master plan of a residential development should be. The DA learned a few lessons as it tried during the lockdown to bully or bulldoze people using eviction orders. So keen is Cape Town, where the biggest urban need for proper housing is, that it had a citizen dragged out of his jester, naked in full public view, and humiliatingly beaten up by law enforcement stormtroops. The same city failed to spend its housing allocation over the last financial year. It failed to spend many budget over multiple financial years. To go and listen to the plight of landless people can't be seen as instigation. It's called decisive leadership, something that DA have failed in this regard. To this shameless DA we say, stop your silly games and negotiate with people with a real housing plan on how to fix the problem. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I now recognise Honourable Minister Simmers.
Deputy Speaker, I'd like to categorically state that illegal land grabs or invasions do not benefit anyone, except those who are seeking to act in an unlawful manner, create anarchy, as we've heard so many speakers before me say, and give vulnerable people false hope that the provision of a housing opportunity will be fast-tracked. This is not how the Western Cape works. Ons is nie 'n banana republiekie. Deputy Speaker, we have consistently shown to be a provincial government that functions within the ambit of the rule of law, and we will continue to do so, particularly when it comes to the provision of housing opportunities. Ons gaan nie toelaat dat individue of groepe probeer om voor ander in die lyn te beweeg nie. Inteendeel, ons is daartoe verbind om ons bejaardes, persone met 'n medische gesertifiseerde gestremdheid, die 15 jaar of langer op die behuisingswaglys is, en ons agterplaatsbewoners eerste te help. Uiters belangrik, Deputy Speaker, is dat elke persoon wat oorweeg gaan word, tog op die behuisingswaglys moet wees, en daar bestaan 'n waglys. Want indien jy nie geregistreer is nie, kan dit letterlik onmoontlik wees vir ons as regering om jy te kan bystaan. Deputy Speaker, since taking office, I've made it a priority to ensure that the provision of housing opportunities is accelerated, particularly for our vulnerable people, as they are the ones that are being denied a housing opportunity when these land grabs occur. Is dit nie genoeg dat ons kwesbare mense reeds al so lank moet wag nie? En nou, deur hierdie grondgrepe, word dit verder vertraag. Hierdie is absoluut onaanvaarbaar. Deputy Speaker, let's now contextualize all of this to what has been happening over the last few months in this province. When it comes to a new greenfield or brand new housing development, it takes in excess of 3 to 5 years for a project to be completed to the point that we hand over units to our beneficiaries. This process includes working smarter to obtain all the relevant and required statutory approvals, which amongst others consist of town planning, environmental impact studies, land surveying, engineering services, and indeed the process of building the physical units themselves. The moment land earmarked for housing development is illegally invaded, it can delay our process to deliver these much needed housing opportunities by 3 months to 5 years, and in rare instances in this province, it has been even longer. This delayed time frame is so because it is often required from my department to engage through lengthy and very expensive litigation to remove, ironically, the individuals who illegally occupy these pockets of land. And all these legal actions are funded from money which we need and wanted to and could have spent on delivering further units to the beneficiaries in our province. Every cent wasted on litigation means a cent less towards delivery to our law-abiding citizens. Various projects in the city of Cape Town, which have been earmarked to commence within this current financial year, can no longer go ahead due to these illegal invasions. And I'll make some examples, Honourable Deputy Speaker. In Khayelitsha, and to be exact, and I hope Member Maran is listening, in Kanani, 11,000 housing opportunities is lost. Still in Khayelitsha, this time in Makassar, Harare, and Kuyasa, 1,570 housing opportunities is lost. And in Marula North, just in Kraaifontein, 1,687 housing opportunities is gone forever. Due to these illegal invasions and the selfish and criminal action of these invaders, more than 14,000 housing opportunities that was earmarked as development opportunities for our elderly and vulnerable persons with a disability, backyard dwellers, and those that have been patiently waiting for 15 years and longer are now no longer available. And this all within the last 3.5 months. It's gone. Is weg. Is vir ewig. En dit is so weg, so die son, die mis inraak by 'n Karoo sonopkoms. Iets wat Member Mitchell goed sal kan weet. Another example, and one that is outside of the city of Cape Town, is Skilpooks. Here, the entire northern section of the area where a planned project was to occur has been invaded, with approximately 2,300 structures on this piece of land as we speak, and all of this in a time frame of 18 months. Even though we've had various engagements and agreements with various stakeholders in the specific community, we continue to find certain individuals not cooperating. And the effect of this, Honourable Deputy Speaker, no development can occur on that portion of land. Opportunities are gone for much needed individuals within the community of Zwelithli. It can happen no more. This clearly demonstrates how these illegal invasions are directly affecting people's lives, Deputy Speaker. The desperate pleas and tears of those that are waiting mean absolutely nothing to these illegal land invaders. And sadly, the African National Congress and the EFF are the propellants of this. There is sufficient proof on social media. These invaders, just like these two parties that I've just highlighted, Honourable Deputy Speaker, they don't have a caring backbone in their bodies. We keep on hearing history lessons when we talk to the realities of today. Deputy Speaker, further to this, when land is invaded, we are also required to now divert much needed and limited resources away from qualifying beneficiaries who have waited patiently for an opportunity towards those who have firstly illegally occupied the land, created new informal settlements, and then they started all of their demands for basic services. Die geld val nie uit die lug uit nie. Dit moet eers vandaan kom. Should this services not be provided, as the city of Cape Town so regularly experiences, they are even further disruptive, and they start having protests, damaging social infrastructure, and holding certain aspects of the city's economy to ransom. Maar hulle het onwettig die grond beset. Waar is die rationaliteit in dit? Deputy Speaker, dan wil sommige in hierdie huis, en ek het aandagtig geluister vandag, vra waarom geoogmerkte geleenthede spreekwoordelik tussen die vinger en die duim wegraak. Besef die realiteit, skrik wakker en drink die koffie. Ons is almal bewus dat die huidige behuisingswaghuis byna 600,000 aansoeke het en gemiddeld wag ons beginsitters in die Weskaap 15 jaar of selfs meer in sommige gebiede. Ons is daarop ingestel om hierdie aan te spreek en daarom is dit een van ons vereistes dat hierdie gekwalifiseerde wetsgehoorsame inwoners eers moet bygestaan word. En ek kan nie toesien dat persone wat gister op die waglys kom of wat gister en vanoggend grond beset, nou skielik onmiddellik moet bygestaan word nie. Hoe verduidelik ons dit aan mense wat so lank wag? En dit ten koste van mense wat nie eens die wet oortree nie. Hulle woon alle gemeenskapsvergaderings by. Al wat hulle net vra, sê net vir ons wanneer kry ons 'n kans. Maar sommige mense wil nie wag nie. When I recently handed over houses in Falkland, Deputy Speaker, I had the honor of engaging an elderly woman of 70 years old, and in jovial isiXhosa, because she has lived in an informal structure for more than 40 years, she was so happy to receive a house, but more so because there was a threat, not only of land invasion of the Falkland site, but also invasion of our specific units. And there's over 400 units that are at various stages of handing over. And her words, I'm going to quote her. She said, "At least this moment has happened to me. And I hope that the attempts of invasion does not happen again, because there are so others like me that are still waiting for their homes, Minister." Regrettably, Deputy Speaker, due to these illegal invasions, there are thousands of deserving and qualifying beneficiaries who will not have a similar moment of joy. Hulle ontneem baie mense se oomblik van geluk. Deputy Speaker, large-scale greenfield developments cannot occur without land. And I need to emphasize developable land. And therefore, as the Western Cape government, we have made more than 365 hectares of land available for integrated human settlements development. And this will yield in excess of 20,000 housing opportunities. Maar ons kan alles maak in die Weskaap, maar ons kan nie grond maak nie. Want die alle grond behoort aan die provinsiale regering of sy plaaslike owerhede nie. We've done this as we want to ensure that the most vulnerable and deserving beneficiaries are provided with this opportunity. But the reality is that more developable land is required, And if all spheres of government make land available for the development of integrated human settlements, we'd be able to assist a lot more people every year. Now, the custodian of national land is Ms. Patricia de Lille, who has continuously refused to release specific pockets of land within the city of Cape Town, which would yield 120,000 housing opportunities. These sites are Kuilenburg, Eysterplaat, Denel, Youngsfield, and Wingfield, all well located and in the hands, sadly still, in the hands of the national minister. She refuses to release it to this province. But in addition to this, that which she has released, we are yet to receive power of attorney, because without power of attorney, we as a provincial department and provincial government cannot do anything, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Beide concrete voorbeelde wat ik nog genoemd heb, Deputy Speaker, wijst duidelijk hoe belangrijk het is dat alle regeringssferen moet samenwerken om die Weskaapse behuisingskwestie op te lossen. Dat gaat niet over een specifieke sfeer van de regering nie. But it does, however, not stop there. Our communities also have a massive role to play. And I would like to take this opportunity to implore our communities to work with government and to work through the relevant government structures in respect of their housing needs. Moet nie die reg in eie hande neem nie. Jy gaan lelik tweede kom. Those with a genuine housing need must ensure that they are registered on the housing demand database, and if they are, to ensure that we have the correct contact details for them. In addition to this, they should also engage the relevant structures, such as their project steering committees and ward councillors, to receive factual information and not allow so-called community leaders to mislead them. Deputy Speaker, in closing, I would like to remind all members present here and virtually, we are all leaders in our own right. And we should be part of the solution and not the problem, as this will demonstrate to the public which we've been elected to serve that we are truly political leaders in service of them. In Afrikaans daar gesegde, en ek wil weer eens hiermee afsluit, om onwettig iets te neem, is so maklik soos 'n handtreekie. Maar onbeskaamde hoop en regverdigheid triomfeer altyd. And what we have been observing the last 3.5 months will not last forever. The rule of law will prevail, and those that are law-abiding citizens, we as the Western Cape government, we care for our citizens, and we will ensure, because you have done your part, that we will play our part. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. That brings us to the end of the order of the day. We now proceed to interpellations. On the question paper, I recognise the Honourable Premier Windi.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you very much to Honourable Heron for the question. My response as follows. 1A, I would like to direct the Honourable Heron and all members of this House to page 210 to 214 of the judgment. The Cape High Court made no finding that this provincial government has no plans to redress spatial apartheid in Cape Town. In fact, the court states at paragraph 487 of that judgment that the more recent decisions of the province as regards affordable housing close to the inner city demonstrate that a more inclusive approach to the aspect which recognizes the importance of reversing spatial apartheid incrementally is now being applied. As to why the court made the findings it did in that matter, I am constrained to point out that in terms of Rule 1963D, any question in terms of which the expression of an opinion is requested is impermissible. Given that Member Heron appears to be asking for my opinion on this judgment, I am constrained to refuse to offer Member Heron my opinion as to why the Western Cape High Court came to the conclusion it did in this matter. And B, the Western Cape government is still in the process of considering the judgment and its effects on both the administration and the executive of the Western Cape government going forward, in consultation with our officials and council. This is being done both in the context of the wide-ranging declaratory orders that have been made, as well as the ambit and effect of the structural interdict. It would be imprudent of me to provide any more detailed comment on the matter at this stage until that process is completed. Deputy Speaker, the question raised of me as to the province's plans for further spatial integration in Cape Town is, however, not dependent on this judgment or any appeal thereof. While this question should have been directed to Minister Simmers or Minister Bradell, given their respective portfolios of human settlements and planning, I can confirm that the Western Cape government is committed to moving forward with the Conradie site, as well as the Somerset precinct for redevelopment, both of which will be affordable housing at scale on a cross-subsidized basis. We have every intention of completing these projects as soon as reasonably possible. The Helen Bowden site at the Somerset precinct has been rezoned for development. This development will put social housing on land right next to the waterfront, some of Africa's most prime real estate. The Conradie site is just outside the CBD and is also close to an economic opportunity space like Goodwood and Epping Industria, and is within walking distance of train stations. Construction of the first phase, which will include over 400 social housing units, has already begun. The project will also include FLISP units, schools, and open market housing. The Belhar CBD is at an advanced stage of development and includes mixed-use housing near to the Belleville CBD. What is unique about this development is that it will not only provide housing, FLISP units, and subsidized units for military veterans, it will also include student accommodation close to some of the Western Cape's largest universities. And so the same policy goes on in municipalities across this province and in CBDs across this province.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. I now recognise Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I wasn't asking for the Premier's opinion. I was asking for the Premier to explain how we have a vision-inspired priority number 4, which commits this government to achieve mobility and spatial transformation. And we have a High Court that found that no such plans exist. In fact, the High Court said it is evident to this court that the province's policies in relation to the reversal of apartheid spatial planning and the promotion of social housing are to all intents and purposes non-existent. This case was argued in November 2019 in this term of office, and after this Premier had promised this Parliament to try and settle this litigation. That's why this interpellation is opposed to the Premier. In this VIP 4, so if this VIP 4 was in fact presented to the court, it was obviously very unconvincing, because the court said the official line from the province bears the hallmark of the entrenchment of apartheid spatial planning and a seemingly blunt refusal to engage with the problem. And the court found that the politicians were the ones at fault, not the officials. The officials were sidelined and ignored by 3 cabinets. The court said, what is of concern about the approach of the province is the apparent disharmony one sees between the frank admissions of the departmental functionaries as to the necessity for a program addressing affordable housing generally, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the uncompromising attitude of its political functionaries that there is no room for poor people in central Cape Town. The court found that this government believes there's no room for poor people in central Cape Town. It's no surprise to me, I was told in the last DA caucus meeting that I ever attended that transformation is a swear word. So we know that as the court found that this government doesn't mean it. And that is why, despite this nice glossy brochure and the well-crafted words that make up this VIP document, and which promises to release public land for housing that is centrally located, we hear the Premier adding the fine print that this is subject to national government doing so first. So VIP 4 is a commitment that is conditional, and the judgment makes it quite clear that this arbitrary condition is unlawful. But Deputy Speaker, there are solutions to addressing spatial transformation, but it will take leadership and a change in attitude to achieve them. And I really had hoped that the Premier would have given us a direction forward, instead of hiding behind a sub judice kind of approach, and approach that suggests that they may still appeal this and we'll drag this out for decades still to come. I mean, I could propose that the Premier brush off the 2010 Cape Town Central City Regeneration Programme as well as the 2012 update to that plan, and implement those provincial sites as integrated developments, mixed use and mixed income, including social housing. And the province could also lead the way on inclusionary housing. VIP4 makes some oblique reference to the inclusionary housing policies, but inclusionary housing has been referenced in provincial government documents since 2012, 3 cabinets ago, but we don't have one, and it isn't referenced in any of the current department.
Finish off, Honourable Member.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recognise Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Premier, for the response. You know, you really have to enjoy the way sometimes Honourable Brett Herron selectively quotes when he was there. He doesn't tell the full picture when he was there. The Honourable Member clearly stated in point 3A of his question, why did the court make this finding? The question that he posed to the Premier clearly indicated he wanted an opinion from the Premier on a finding of the court, which the Premier clearly indicated that the matter is still not finalized. But Honourable Deputy Speaker, through the Premier, it is critical that we are to overcome the cruel legacy of apartheid spatial planning, and we must identify and create opportunities for affordable housing within the inner city and within the immediate surrounds of the Cape Metro. Obviously, this will enable us to see previously disadvantaged individuals and families live closer to opportunities for work, play, and education, and build sustainable livelihoods. Regardless of the court rulings or our political ideologies and discourses, this is a moral and constitutional imperative which we all must uphold, and I think the Premier has clearly alluded to. For this reason, I would like to ask Honourable Deputy Speaker from the Premier, whether if you can just, he did indicate earlier into some projects, whether they can just perhaps reaffirm with the House, what are the projects in the Cape Metro that would serve to provide low-cost housing, and what is the delay in getting such project and such developments of the ground? Surely, Deputy Speaker, if there are any impediments to such developments, we must find a workable solution to remove such impediments to ensure that we can achieve those objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I recognise Honourable Mumbi.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The Western Cape Provincial Government is notoriously known for undermining the importance of public participation. Like in the apartheid days, the voices of the poor masses of our people do not matter to the provincial government of the Western Cape. When the decision to dispose of the property was taken in November 2015, the opposition in this House, as well as the activists in civil society, objected to the sale and argued that the land must be used for housing and redress of apartheid spatial legacy. The activists argued that the sale was procedurally and legally flawed and failed to take account of the potential social use of the land. The court agreed and set aside the illegal sale. It declared that the regulation under Western Cape Land Administration Act used to undermine public participation were unconstitutional and invalid, and ordered the city and the Western Cape Provincial Government to submit a comprehensive report by the 31st of May 2021 on how they will properly implement their duties to provide social housing and address apartheid spatial planning in the Western Cape, in Cape Town in particular. Most prime land in the CBD is used for parking, and many others are sold to private developers. While courts have stopped the sale of Tafelberg, the city is moving ahead with the sale of Site B, the prime land in Foreshore. We reiterate our call for a moratorium on sale of all public land in the Western Cape and for land audit of all state-owned land, including by municipalities and SOEs. We must also pay special attention to the long-term apartheid lease agreement at Stellenbosch municipality. Today, we must get a commitment.
Thank you, Honourable Mumbi. Your time is up. I recognise Honourable Herron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I really urge this government to honour its constitutional commitments and its court-mandated obligations and not to pursue an appeal. We can achieve major structural reform in the City of Cape Town if we're willing to do so. Let's go back to the drawing board for the Sea Point Main Road precinct, which in the regeneration plans and in the 2012 version includes the Tafelberg School and the Vineyard Mansions. The 2012 plan proposes 16,000 square meters of bulk development of mixed use, mixed income, mixed tenure development. And social housing companies have already indicated that they are eager to develop affordable housing here. So let's make it happen. Then we can go to the city Bowl Block, right here behind our parliament between Loop, Dorp, Bree and Lewin Streets. The 2010 prospectus projected that this site could develop 25,000 square meters of bulk development, an excellent site for high density mixed use development that can include affordable housing, and with the right partnership, this can be achieved at no cost to the province. The Transport and Public Works Department is planning to relocate the government garage. Let's use the well-located government garage precinct in Ruland Street for another mixed use, mixed income development. That 2012 regeneration plan projects that 100,000 square meters of bulk can be developed there. We can leverage this well-located development site to deliver affordable housing and integration right in the heart of the city. I can go through each of the sites in the 2010 and the 2012 city regeneration plans. They all present opportunities to achieve spatial transformation, and they all have one thing in common: public land under the control of the provincial government. Then, Deputy Speaker, let's adopt an inclusionary housing law that requires municipalities to implement inclusionary housing policies as part of their planning mandate. Inclusionary housing done right can contribute to housing delivery numbers in real terms, supplementing what is being delivered directly by the state and reducing the affordable housing deficit. Inclusionary housing can assist us with the constitutional obligation to address inclusion and address the apartheid spatial form. Fortunately, while our governments have lacked courage across the board, national and provincial and local governments, to implement inclusionary housing, private developers are showing leadership and are doing so voluntarily. And private developers are demonstrating that inclusionary housing can work and they are willing to contribute. But what they are pleading for is policy certainty. So let's provide it. The work has been done, and I can give the Premier the draft. It's really good to go. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Heron. I now recognise Premier Windy.
Thank you very much, and to all of those of you who participated in this mini debate. I think, first of all, to the Honourable Heron's first point about not asking my opinion, when I read the question that says, A, why did the court make this finding, that is asking me for an opinion. So an opinion on the court's finding. So, you know, he can't come and react to what I'm saying and then not base it primarily on his first question. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of this deal. He also says repeatedly that I did not do anything with regards to trying to find a settlement before the courts actually made their finding. And I will clarify that today to say to him that he can stop misleading the House. We definitely did try to find a settlement. The answer is yes, we did. And we obviously didn't manage it, but we did try. The next point is about inclusionary housing, and I agree with him on this. And all I can say is that watch this space, because, of course, this is policy, this is planning policy, and we are busy with it. I also want to say that, perhaps I'll come back to him now, just to the Honourable Mackenzie. And I think, I mean, I spoke in the earlier speech around land invasions. I spoke about the numbers of properties. But I think in your question, what really comes to light is, or comes to my mind, is the Helen Bowden site. This is a site that is right next door to some of the most expensive real estate on the African continent. And this is where we have already passed the planning processes. We are ready to deliver inclusionary housing right there and then. And of course, very interesting, this very same organizations who end up in the courts trying to get an outcome on the Tafelberg site are the very same who break the law and actually invade this site. So my call would be to those organizations, if you really want this to happen in the inner city, it's time to now go and actually ask those people who you put in to those sites illegally to please make way so that we can produce inclusionary housing for the people who need it and deserve it. Then the Honourable Mvimbi, I just want to say it is very rich of you to come here and lecture us without giving us what you did when you were mayor in Plettenberg Bay, because of course that is the model of how people have developed while under your leadership, not. So I think I'm going to just leave it there. And then coming back to the Honourable Heron. And as I've said earlier, that we are absolutely committed. We transferred the property of the Woodstock Hospital to the City of Cape Town when you were there to actually produce inclusionary housing. We have committed our land, and of course you mentioned some other properties, and we will definitely be having a look at that. But the land that is already on the table, I answered in the earlier debate as well as to you in this question. But of course it is about local government land, about our land, and about national government land. And perhaps this is where I would read a statement out, and I'm sure the House would agree. And the statement goes as follows. There are a number of really well-located parcels of land in the hands of national government. For example, Wingfield in Kensington. But although we've repeatedly requested transfers to include these sites in our housing plans, we don't seem to have enough influence to make it happen. Our repeated requests have been ignored. And of course, that's a quote. And that quote is actually made, or that statement was made by the Honourable Brett Heron in October 2017. And so I ask the Honourable Heron to also join us in this. I take what he said about inclusionary housing in our land, and we have committed to that, and we will follow through on it. But I want him to commit here, because all of a sudden he now has more influence through his own political party on this very piece of land and a few others. And I hope that I hear from the National Minister very soon that that land will be transferred for the use for housing and inclusionary housing here in this province and in this city. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. That brings us to the end of interpellations. We now move over to questions in terms of Rule 202. And just to recap, we have 4 opportunities for follow-up questions, and the honourable member who posed the oral question as printed on the order paper will have the first opportunity for a follow-up question. So I recognise, and we're starting on question 3, and these are questions that have stood over from Thursday, the 10th of September. I recognise the Honourable Mbombo. Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Can you hear me?
You. Yes, I hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member Philander, for the question about the major contributors related to pre-existing infrastructure, facility management, administrative processes to ensure the quality healthcare services. This question is general, meaning that one cannot be able to pinpoint exactly on what are the contributors. But generally, when you strengthen all the systems or the building blocks of that build a health system, and then it makes every deliverable to be possible. And for the Department of Health, they had all of these building blocks as the health systems under one big major health system have been strengthened throughout. For example, we have got a significant infrastructure in place already pre-COVID that could be used for this. For example, our hospitals and primary care facilities were able to manage their COVID caseload even at the peak. There's always been strong governance structures in place with the department and transversal with other government departments even prior. Whilst the COVID was led by the Premier as part of the Provincial Command Council and his entire cabinet, with the Department of Health being the lead department, but also the role of the governments where we had even these kind of relations with the local government and also with the national government. It also contributed. In addition, that the department always had very strong and stable administrative teams who could easily be able to be stepped up in terms of the COVID. So for example, the supply chain management, That's why even the AG didn't find any irregular expenditures in regards to even to the issue of the PPE, that we could even manage to erect the quality temporary structure such as the CTICC and the Bracken Gate is part of those, same as with the triage and testing sites that initially we targeted 17, or what the national, they called them fever clinics, but we ended up adding them more in order for the people to be able to make use of those to stop the spread at the primary healthcare level. The people management system, where we could be able to allocate people accordingly, and also to even to resume or to assume or even employ even contract workers, is one also of our strength. So through our vigorous and transparent procurement system, we had built up strong relationships with the suppliers of goods for many years with regular and timeless payments. This allowed us to source goods like PPE and ventilators with relative ease. Thank you, Speaker. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. I recognise Honourable Philander and then Honourable Windvogel.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Minister, for the response, your very comprehensive response. Through you, Deputy Speaker, Minister, are you aware of any infrastructure failures that hampered service delivery during this period, or any that required urgent attention? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Deputy Speaker, those that are related to in response to the COVID, there was never some delays impact on such, taking note that all other infrastructures, they had to follow the regulation related to the lockdown, because we knew that some sectors like construction, they had to be put on hold. Same as those we even initiated before the COVID, for example, the ambulance stations, some additional infrastructure from the hospitals, the new clinics that were there have to be put on hold during the times of the lockdown, as according to the regulations. But with the ones that are related to with the COVID, for example, the field hospitals, not only those that were like the CTICC, the Bracken Gate, the Tusong, although the Tusong was under the MSF, but those field hospitals and other additional hospitals that are attached to our existing hospitals, they still continued. For example, the 32-bed Hermanus Field Hospital, where we converted from the underground storeroom. The 15-bed for Vredendal Hospital, where we converted the boiler room into the hospital. The Harry Comey Hospital in George, additional beds for the 20 for the COVID at the field hospital, also additional 20 for the COVID, and also for those who have got the resistant TB. It still continued. The Sonsral field hospital, it continued. So in regard to the response to the COVID, same applies with the tents, which is triage and testing site, stroke, the fever clinics in primary healthcare facilities. They still continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I recognise Honourable Windvogel.
Deputy Speaker, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Through you to the MEC, the reality is that COVID-19 outbreak exposed the disparities that exist in public healthcare in between the public and private healthcare. This forced the government to pay a handsome sum of money to private healthcare to use its facility. So I want the MEC to tell us about the challenges and lessons learned from this pandemic and how they will be dealt with moving forward. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Member. Taking note that the private aspect of starting from the licensing is a delegated function as according to the National Health Act that comes from the National Department of Health to the provinces. However, since the National Health Act came late, I think 2003, already when the Western Cape Department already promulgated the regulations related to the private licensing coming from the 1977 National Health Act, which all the provinces actually still is that act is still active because of the dual competences for both the province and the national. So that one is still existing. So therefore, that's why when it comes to the Western Cape, things might be a little bit different in terms of the relations between the private and the public. Now, to the question, based on that, the responsibility of the National Department of Health had first to negotiate the tariffs. The tariffs were negotiated by the National Health Minister in regards specifically on the critical care beds, which across the country, which is an international norm, where the public will have lesser of the beds, even if they do have enough beds. But the issue is about also the critical care skills, like the ICU doctors, nurses, and all of those. So after there were negotiations, now it came back to the provinces now to negotiate the specifics. Although, for example, at the time, I think it was 16,300 and something for the whole package, and also to negotiate in terms of what would be the average length of stay, because you wouldn't want to have a public patient to be treated differently, whether the best or the worst quality in the private, where now you ended up having different kinds of treatment unfairly, unequally for whether the person is in private or public. So for us with the Western, when I was making that initial preamble, it was to show that already by the time that the national minister was busy with the tariff negotiations, actually for us, we're waiting for him up to the level that actually we put pressure on him to sign it off, because already the service level agreements between each and every hospital group, be it biggest, be it smallest in the Western Cape, as according to the relations which we had, where I initiated the first meeting with them around the COVID. The indemnity that needed to be signed in that aspect, the clinical protocols that have to be developed so that patients don't get treated unequally or differently. And then lastly, taking note that in the private, the only healthcare professionals that are appointed by the groups is the nurses. All others, they are private on its own. A medical specialist is not an employee of, let's say, a Mediclinic or Netcare. They're not. They're individuals. They are private. A radiographer, a physiotherapist, a lab, they are not employees. They are not part of the hospital employment. Therefore, we had to negotiate each and every one of those. Of course, I want to acknowledge Dr. Nicholas Crisp, who an advisor to the national minister, but fortunately who reside here in the Western Cape, whom previously we worked with him in the space of the forensic pathology lab nationally at the time that we were transferred from the SAPS to the provincial hub. So that part of the negotiations, we have to do it provincial. So that's why for us, we ended up, by the time that we were ready, the national minister was not ready, at least he agreed. However, by the time now we were ready for the patients to be transferred, it's the time that there was a dexamethasone that was introduced. And also there was a time for the high flow nasal flow oxygen that was introduced. Therefore, it meant that like in Grooteskier, the nasal flow, there was no need for the patients actually to be hospitalized in the ICU. They are still even using the high care beds. And therefore, it ended up that where people now don't need much of the ICU, although they might need a critical care or high care space, and therefore we ended up no need to transfer many patients. We only sent 4 patients to test the system around that. But as I'm saying that, even up to this stage, there hasn't been any need. Therefore, that's why we exploit it further for the private EMS, for the private GP, and also for the private lab, for the other laboratory beyond the COVID. So that's why we can safely say and proudly say that the universal health coverage, that internationally and also nationally is where we're supposed to go to in regard to the comprehensive health service that we provide to the people that require, because it's an NBNB that you cannot implement UHC without private. Without private includes private health, as I mentioned, private includes civil society, private includes the individuals who can even offer a package for home-based care, like at the community health care worker level, or even at the senior principal medical specialist. So that's why we are saying that for us, we are ready. We have demonstrated that for the COVID, it's doable. It doesn't stop us. If there's a need for any other discipline, or if it could be any other outbreak for any condition, or for any others where our patients wait longer, let's say for any type of operation, just for example, in the case of the orthopedic cases where they can wait even for 3 or 4 years, it doesn't stop to negotiate further where we can say that using the similar kind of the template we use for the COVID, can you please open additional beds for XYZ instead of now saying that the patients in Khayelitsha have to wait on the chairs for 10 days in order to get a bed for a specific kind of a discipline within the medicine. So that's where we are. We haven't paid much money to the private. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Philander, that's you. I see Honourable Mfoko's put her hand down. Honourable Philander, over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister Mbombo, we've seen facility readiness in a matter of weeks in the Western Cape. And well done to Team Western Cape and well done to all those partners involved. What were some of the lessons learned in terms of getting those facilities ready, and how does the department intend to utilize those efficiencies going forward? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. As I indicated earlier, that there are many lessons that we have learned from the space of the COVID. Not only about to demolish or to dismantle the hierarchies, the red tapes, when it comes to how government works. Because you'll find that, let's say, for example, for the infrastructure, it used to, actually it still does in terms of the IDMS, which is the Integrated Delivery Management System for the infrastructure. For 2 years, actually, you'll find that you're still in stage 1 to 4, so from terms of the concept, the business case. Even by the time that you'll find that you spend 2 years, still there is no foundation that you can see. And the people are asking, didn't you say that you are building this ABC? And then we even had a sort turning some time. And they say, oh, yes, we are still actually within, we are on time, but there's nothing, because that's how the system works. But with the CTICC, where we could do it for 6 weeks, where we send the request to the public works, because they are the custodians of the infrastructure for the whole of the Western Cape government. When the Department of Health said that we need a field hospital, and we can see that this one will be ideal, in as much as that at the national level they were saying use the stadium, because look at KZ and they identify as Moses Mabhida, and we said no, in the Western Cape the weather is completely different, so we cannot. Even at the time the Department of Defense said that we've got the whole of the field that you can use, and I said no, it doesn't work like that. For us, for now, CTICC is one of those, and in addition, if there is a need for extra, CTICC2 could also be used. So it took 6 weeks for these two departments, plus also with a department of the Premier through the DG, who were able to facilitate this. And then it went on, not only about also the infrastructure, plus also even the beds, 860 something beds, to have the oxygens to be in all those walls around that part of it, and also to ensure that it meets the international standards in terms of the entry, the exit, and all of those. So these are kind of some of the lessons that you can learn, but most important is about working together, the whole of society approach, the whole of government approach, where it does show, as we keep on saying, that most of our health problems, they were social problems, not ours, like the social determinants of health. Therefore, it needs everyone, local government, the civil society, and everyone. Just look at how the hotspot strategy, it has been implemented. Each and every minister, MEC, every HOD is responsible for each hotspot across all our 6 districts, including Metro, plus the sub-districts within the Metro. And the people are not even health related, but when they do the reporting twice a week at the extended cabinet, as well in the main cabinet for the HODs, you'll find that they will talk about the case management, they will talk about the humanitarian relief, they will talk about the economy recovery, they will talk about the Q&I, quarantine and isolation, and the whole of that pack, yet they're not even half. So it's one of these lessons that we have learned, that health, it goes beyond. And lastly, the issue of the poverty, the inequality, the unemployment and economy, it does actually have an impact to the overall state of the country and also of the province and also in the communities. And unfortunately, these things are beyond the health system, but we have to absorb all of those. So it takes them back now, everyone to be responsible for the things that will have been dealt with outside our hospitals, outside health, but at least now people are taking responsibility. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Philander, over to you, last opportunity.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Through you, Minister, as infrastructure is not within your portfolio, Minister, but I would like to have your take in terms of facility management and administrative processes, Minister. In your view, what does this mean for ongoing discussions around the provision, and you've briefly touched on it, around the provision of UHC in the Western Cape with reference to the NHI bill? Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Over to you, Minister.
Okay, it's another question that is not related to this, but I'm fine to respond because I've already even touched on this earlier. As we kept on saying that the NHI bill, it's a mechanism that has been initiated by the national. It's a funding mechanism in order, according to them, to address the whole of the affordability by the patients, plus also to address the inequality in regard to the funding of the health system. There's nothing about universal health coverage there. You can read the universal coverage, which is an international approach on how to deliver the services. And financing is part of the whole of the UHC. But for South Africa, we're not talking about anything about the UHC. UHC is about the affordability, the availability, the accessibility, and the quality of care, where no one should die or should receive worse quality or receive no care at all on the basis of the affordability. So, which is what we are saying, that in the context of Western Cape, for us, we are not waiting for the NHI bill that actually is not going to address the issue. So that's why we are saying that at the end, we should be able to test some of the tenets of the UHC in some of the other areas. If you may recall, a chair of the SC Health, there was a time that in the previous term where already us with the Eastern Cape and the KZN as MECs, we initiated to pilot the UHC in some of, in collaboration in some of our areas. For example, where we used to even to alternate to have meetings, whether I'm hosting it, then they come here as colleagues plus their HODs, or I come to the Eastern Cape. And for Western Cape at the time, you identify Saldanha Bay, and also the which is outside the metro, and also in Khayelitsha, part of the metro at the time, to be part of the UHC, because For example, in Saldanha Bay, the advantage is because you can be able to tap on the space of the employer to contribute towards of some of the important packages. Like a person may have 5 operations and whatever, where the people don't have the medical aid, but as an employer, they can be able to make the contributions, and so that you don't leave anyone behind. In the Eastern Cape, they identify parts of the BCM and also the Sabata Dalinyebo, which is around the Amtata, as part of that. So we initiate that, but unfortunately, in the 2019 March, also at this time, also the MEC, Dr. Zlomo, was part of this. So unfortunately, now things change, and then there were changes of office. I'm the only one who has left, but we're still exploring that part of it at the government official levels. Yeah, thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. We move over to question 4. I recognize you again, Minister Mbombo.
Okay, so that I don't confuse, thank you, Deputy Speaker, is the one on the department's evaluation of the various districts' interventions regarding behavioral change.
That's correct.
Thank you, yes, thank you, Member Philander. Rapid assessments were conducted to provide the basis for a province-wide review of the measures that were taken to combat COVID-19 and also drawing lessons across. So with the weekly hotspots report, which I mentioned earlier on the district interventions, were used as to compile some of these briefings, and also they're part of the jogs across the provinces. So what you see, what has been happening at a provincial level with where the Premier has been chairing the Provincial Command Council, which is a cabinet which has been extended to the district mayors. And the reason for that is not only to follow the JOG one as part of the local government, but also from the health perspective, the district health system is a provision, a structure as according to the National Health Act, in order to ensure that the health services do happen in the periphery. So it made sense to include the district mayors, but not only at the district level, but also within the district, which is we call it a sub-district, but using the municipality boundaries, the municipalities as well, where each and every district will have a conversation with the sub-districts as the municipalities, where they could be able to have this specifically around the behavior change interventions and also the advocacy. How do we measure these? On the weekly basis, the Department of the Premier do share the COVID-19 research poll, indicating the levels of public compliance to various measures, for example, the wearing of masks, hand hygiene, and all of those. And then if we want to add any additional variables within there, where you say that, can you please add, maybe just focus on what we have seen in Atlantis or in Danune or wherever in the rural, we could be able to get all of these. And then it makes us to keep on reflecting and changing or reviewing some of the interventions or the way we do it, what we have we will have actually proposed. Now, what is happening now, we are busy, I think by the 20th November, where we could have the overall, where we are conducting a holistic and province-wide assessment of the implementation of the Western Cape Government Hotspot Strategy, where the key focus will determine, amongst others, at what extent the contributions of these interventions, whether we have achieved or not. For example, our containment strategy, our acute hospital plan, our public-private, which will answer the question that was asked by Member Van Vogel, how we'll be able to know that we have achieved all these. So I think there are about 4 areas that we are focusing on, and this is being done together with the academics. Remember, in the province, we've got 4 academic hospitals and also outsiders, so that we can be able to make use of these even for the future district response, not only for the COVID, but also for the others, especially in regard to the changing behavior and also in preparedness for the resurgence if need be. Thank you, Speaker.
Minister. Honourable Philander, over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Through you, Minister, in terms of interventions and innovations, Minister, We have experienced during our oversight visits this past few weeks directly in terms practice of how medicine gets distributed, the adapted appointment system, and to accommodate ongoing care during the management of the pandemic. Minister, does the department intend to continue with some of these practices in order to relieve the load or congestion that these facilities sometimes experience? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. In regard to the distribution of the medicine, it was there pre-COVID, CDU, Chronic Dispensing Unit, which we initiated it prior that it became the National Intervention. They call it CCMD. So it has been there. However, there were stringent criteria in terms of who should form part of it, because there was this kind of obsession that you don't want the patients to relapse and also probably to even to default the treatment. So they were very critical, where it's only up to when the patient, now the clinician, whoever the specialist treating the patient, might feel that that person now can only come twice a year, which is once in 6 months. And therefore, we could be able to distribute such that medicine, where the person can pick it up, whether in the nearest clinic, or in some cases we'll find in their old age home, or some where voluntarily the community leaders could be able to take, like in the ward councillor's office or in churches. So it used to be like in Kailicha, there was even, there still is a guy, there is a guy who initially was driving, was cycling to get this medication to the people, and now and they have a bakkie and also has got an office where. So we used to do that. Now with the COVID, especially in regard to some people with the comorbidities, where we wanted to reduce the traffic of those people coming to the facilities. So we ended up now adding more and also loosening some of the strict criteria around that. Hence, with the Uber, for some of the, in some other areas, community health workers, where they distributed as many, and then with the others, those who were supposed probably to come on monthly basis, where we give them 2 months supply, and also for adding more of the community health workers in terms of the distribution. And then lastly, where we initiated a WhatsApp application, where if in case probably you might have been left behind, or you know of someone who's on chronic medication but maybe might not be part of the program. So we continue with that. So that's why I'm trying to indicate that there was some of these prior, but now during this time we have to increase it more. However, going to post-COVID, or now that we have seen that the epidemic at least is declining, we don't want to open it up widely in the sense that, again, those people who are at risk might come flock back where they ended up being exposed, because we don't know what's going to happen. But at the same time, we have to keep on opening on some of those. For example, with the TB, the people who would have supposed to have initiated treatment as part of being diagnosed of TB, and also we can see that there have been people who have been lesser diagnosed of TB during that time. Although in end of May, when we say we're initiating non-COVID cases, at least now we can see some of the increase. Same applies with the issue of the immunizations of the children. Although in the rural areas, mostly because they are using the mobile clinics to drive from the satellite clinic and to the areas, we never stopped. But we did see a decrease even in the utilization of the primary health care services. We've seen that decrease. Same applies with a decrease in the operations, such as the eye cataracts and other minor operations, and also with the elective surgeries, which we need to beef up. So there are many of some of these interventions, which actually it made us to have more space in order to manage the COVID. But unfortunately, there are some of the disciplines, some of the services where it cannot continue as such. We still have to open it up for some of the people to come back. but whilst we still have to protect the vulnerables. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Van Vogel.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, while it's welcome that the Western Cape has drastically reduced its infection numbers, however, it is concerning that areas like Garden Route and Cape Winelands are showing higher numbers in the rural areas, while in the metro district like Tygerberg have shown high numbers since March. So can the MEC tell us what has worked well for districts like Khayelitsha, which now, and why Tygerberg is still showing a higher number than other districts? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm not aware of any number that are showing high. I'm not aware, according to the data that is in front of me. There is no one size fits all, and also the epidemic, just like when it entered South Africa, it was not all in all provinces. So it ended up to be more in the Western Cape. In the Western Cape, it started to be more in the metro because of the various reasons. Same now, you'll find that when it goes to the Garden Route might be, let's say, 4 weeks later than metro in terms of the comparison. And then the West Coast, where it could be 6 weeks, where in the Cape Winelands, it might have been maybe 3 weeks and so forth. So you need to understand that even within the metro, you may find that it might have been earlier in Khayelitsha and Klepfontein and say, let's say Tygerberg, and then find that, it might have been actually at the beginning, it was in the southern and the western. And then it kept on going and going and going and going. So that's how things are. That is the nature of the virus, because it moves with the people. So same applies. Then we saw the Gauteng, we saw the Eastern Cape, we saw the KZN, and then with the smaller provinces, we could see. So generally, it doesn't. In South Africa, it was never actually being epidemic to be same everywhere at the same time. So same applies in the province. Having said that, we are also the first to see that the numbers have been decreasing. Not only decreasing because of the cases, because knowing that we implemented differentiated strategy in terms of the testing, because we have to respond accordingly to the data we receive, especially to prioritize vulnerable groups. Therefore, it was about that based on the number of the healthcare workers who tested positive, based on the number of the positivity rate, which is important in number of tests that you take to the national lab, what is the positivity rate? Just for FYI to the members, we once had a positivity rate of about 40%. Right now, we're sitting below 10%, which is a demonstration. That's why I'm saying that I'm not aware about where the numbers have increased. They don't have any numbers that increase. However, because again, we are introducing another differentiated strategy for the testing to add more like people, because now we're going to open up for people who are going for the surgeries, for operations. Therefore, there might be that we have to test them before. And also because there will be more people who are going to be going back to work wherever, and therefore it means that we might have to be open for the people to be tested if they've been infected at work, especially at the time when they might infect more people. So we might have some changes where we can see more cases. And also the other part of showing that the numbers are not decreasing in terms of the COVID, it's where we've seen hospitalization numbers where it have been decreased, including the PUIs, the persons under investigations, where we've seen them decreasing. And then lastly, the oxygen supply usage in the utilization. We used to use in our oxygen bulk about more than 60%. We're around 40-something% in terms of the use of oxygen. It means that you don't have people who need an oxygen because we have fewer people who get admitted. Lastly, That's why with the national now, we keep on coming up with some piloting some of the other interventions as according to the evidence. So that's why we introduce serology, which is where we use blood and test antibodies. So the 4,000, about 4,000 specimens that we used as a leftover specimens from the people who came for the antenatal care, which is we use that specimen. And then for the people who have come for the HIV, which we use those specimens, which are not a representation of anybody per se, where we saw that among those, 40% of those were positive. And then you see that in most of the informal settlements, that's where actually people were positive, just to show that even as much as that, the number of cases might not have been higher, because I think we had 105. So it shows that actually some people might have been positive, asymptomatic, on the basis that you are seeing antibodies, which the national now is expanding these throughout, where they will have the household surveys, where we can expand into some other facilities, not only in the Western Cape, also across the province, because it gives us an indication how many people might need to have a vaccine if need be, because the 20% of the population, that gives you 12 million sort of that they were estimating, so that when they release the vaccination, when it's available, they'll know how many people could be vaccinated. Probably they may reduce that part of it when they are aware that there are many people who have built antibodies, taking note that these antibodies, there's no guarantee that at this stage that they can be permanent. I think 3 months, which is it's not a surprise because it's a coronavirus. Even with the flu, you'll have a flu in January, you can have it in December again. So that's where we are. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Philander, over to you.
My apologies, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, through you to the Minister. Minister, come Monday, God willing, how will the department adapt its behavioural change initiatives? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. I'm just assuming that you mean that for the people, not the department, who change behavioral change. The issue of the NPR, which is non-pharmaceutical interventions, these will stay with us for the next 2 years. So the same way with the HIV/AIDS in the early 90s, where we spoke about condomize, use a condom, A, B, C, D. It's still going to be the same. You still have to use your mask because that's the only way where you avoid not to spit to another person. And also in case someone is spitting, that's at least you are also protected. So that is the only way. Same is with the washing of the hands, the washing of the surface, because the issue is about the spitting, the sneezing, and the coughing on the surface or on your hand. So these are part of this that's going to still remain. And same, if you remember yesterday when the president announced the lockdown level 1, the issue of the gatherings, still we had to be cautious about those, whether 50% or 250, but you might be safe to open for the economy, but you are not safe from the virus, if I could put it like that, because you still have to avoid non-ventilated areas. And if you are in the non-ventilated, try not to spend more time, the duration there. So that's why the open spaces are the ones that are preferable. You still has to protect the vulnerable, the over 55-year-olds, those with comorbidities. You still have to protect them, or no matter what. So these behavioral changes still have to remain with us for the next 2 years until we do have the vaccine. But we hear now some of the tests, the vaccines, lab tests now have to be paused because of many various reasons, be it not safe for the patients and also whatever reason. So that's why these behavioral changes, we have to stick with them no matter what. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Windvogel. Your hand is down. Are there any further opportunities that you would like to pose to the question? No, I'm going to assume We then move over to question 7. I recognize the Honourable Minister Madikizela. Minister, can you hear us?
Hello, Deputy Speaker.
There you are. We can hear you. You may proceed.
Thank you very much for the question from Member Mackenzie. The Western Cape government has a comprehensive and cohesive strategy for mobility and access in the Western Cape through Provincial Sustainable Transport Program, which has been adapted to respond to the immediate needs brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, and will be further informed by the longer-term implications and potential changes to mobility patterns brought about the pandemic. The strategy, Deputy Speaker, has been focused on maximizing safety of passengers and limiting the spread of the disease, while supporting essential services, essential workers, and broader economic activity. Now, key components of the approach, Deputy Speaker, include the institutional communication coordination. With regard to this, the Western Cape has implemented appropriate institutional structures to ensure coordination and communication between different departments and role players. The purpose of this was to understand COVID-19 related transport challenges, identify required interventions, and plan and oversee implementation. The second part of this is the establishment of critical transport services to meet COVID-19 needs. Now, in response to this, Deputy Speaker, dedicated services were introduced to transport high-risk patients to and from quarantine and isolation sites, and to transport frontline healthcare workers. This has been implemented through the Red Dot Taxi Service, which is an innovative partnership formed between the Western Cape government, my department in particular, Umanyano Travel Services, which represents Atako Western Cape, and of course the Department of Health. Red Dot commenced operations in mid-May and has since provided over 10,000 trips for quarantine and isolation and over 65,000 trips for frontline healthcare workers. The third element, of course, is enabling safe contracted bus services. Contracted bus services, including the Golden Arrow bus service and Go George, have continued to operate with standards and requirements revised to align with national directives and to manage the spread of disease. The fourth element was to spearhead safer minibus taxi services and facilities. With regard to this, the Western Cape has worked with the minibus taxi industry to adhere to capacity limitations and other conditions through the lockdown period, with dedicated focus at taxi ranks. Nonetheless, Deputy Speaker, compliance and enforcement remain a challenge. In response to this, the Western Cape government is developing the flagship Blue Dot minibus taxi incentive program, which would allow for the introduction and improved enforcement of COVID-19 and other standards for improved quality of service and safety. The fifth element is supporting safe restoration of rail services and learner transport. The department is supporting safe restoration of rail services, including establishment of an interim bus service to meet critical transport needs along the central line. Efforts are also underway to ensure that learner transport services resume in a way that minimizes the risk of virus spread, maintains livelihood for operators, and support efficient provision of services. And of course, Deputy Speaker, the learner transport is under the Department of Education, and we've been working together with the Department of Education in this effort. The sixth element is the distribution of sanitizing and hygiene materials. Availability and affordability of sanitizing and hygiene materials has at times been a challenge. So the Western Cape has worked to support provision of material to transport services providers, to transport service providers, including the minibus taxi industry. The seventh one is the monitoring adherence management and smart use of information. This has been implemented by leveraging the integrated transport hub within the Department of Transport and Public Works for collecting passenger feedback information via USSD feedback and managing data through working jointly with the City of Cape Town to monitor and collect information at taxi rank. Again, the Western Cape government recognizes that the transport system in the Western Cape was in crisis even before the pandemic. With the collapse of the rail, stalling of the N2 express bus service, and of course, increasing congestion. The strategy for access and mobility beyond the COVID-19 pandemic is encompassed in the Provincial Sustainable Transport Program. It prioritizes rail and minibus taxi services as well as bus services and is underpinned by the Integrated Transport Hub for the smart use of technology and data and by development of the appropriate institutional structures for resolving the transport crisis. Communication regarding COVID-19 related transport measures has included the following, Deputy Speaker: a passenger app and free USSD service that has been developed to enable passenger feedback on non-compliance with COVID-19 safety protocols such as capacity restrictions and availability of sanitizer. These services were advertised to the public via social media on Department of Public Works and Transport platforms, including Safely Homes platforms, as well as Western Cape government platforms and large digital billboards. This was further enhanced through media releases. COVID-19 communication materials were prepared and disseminated at public transport interchanges, such as taxi ranks. Distribution of the material was done through public transport partners, including GAPS, Metro Rail, and Santaco. For Red Dot taxi services, all vehicles are branded and fitted with passenger information pamphlets, which display the standards that must be adhered to and contact information for reporting of the non-compliant, including a free USSD service. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for this comprehensive answer. I obviously have to say I was part of one of the initiative, Deputy Speaker, at the Mitchells Plain taxi rank, and I've seen the benefits of the service to the community. And I just want to find out from the Minister, given his answer, and we've seen now there's been if you like, an upgrading to open business and and more individuals are going to access the transport service. Has the communication strategy from the Department of the Minister taken, or has there been planning now that we are in level 1 or going forward into level 1 for the usage of the service and the potential increase of the usage of the service in many of our communities? Has that been taken into account? And I won't suspect, Deputy Speaker, the Minister wouldn't have the exact details with him now because it is partly a new question. And if you can just share some details about the planning, given that we are now moving to level 1, and is he seeing a significant increase for the use of the services? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Of course, there are a number of things that need to happen as we move to level 1 from the 20th of this month. There will be an ongoing communication, Member Mankezi, through you, Deputy Speaker. The available transport modes vis-a-vis the number of passengers that will now be going to work, including, of course, the school children. Part of that, of course, is our multi-pronged strategy to deal, one, with the rail challenges, working very closely with the PRASA and National Department of Transport. And I must say that since the lockdown, there's been the cooperation has improved immensely. Second part, of course, is to deal with the challenges in the minibus taxi industry, because this is an industry that almost 50% of the entire passengers. So they transport the equal number of people with both rail and bus service combined. So that is why you might have noticed that there's been a lot of focus from me in particular to make sure that we deal with some challenges in this particular industry, like engaging the planning authorities, like municipalities, to really assess the supply and demand in terms of operating licenses, because we do know that we have a large number of people who are operating without operating licenses. On one hand, Member Mackenzie, through you, Deputy Speaker, they are saying that the demand is there. On another hand, the planning authorities are very cautious because they fear that issuing more permits might oversaturate the route and it might end up not being profitable. And so this is now the discussion that we are having so that we can deal with the issue of illegal operators. And lastly, Deputy Speaker, is that of course we are waiting for the National Minister to give more details, particularly on other modes of transport since the announcement by the President. And our communication then will then be based on that information that will be coming from the National Minister, and then we'll take it from there in terms of making sure that we communicate in such a way that will actually address some of the concerns in the public transport space in rail and bus and in the minibus taxi industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, again for that answer. Through you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, what we've seen is there's always been a lot of focus on the metro. And obviously the metro being the city of Cape Town, we've got the big economy, but sometimes I do feel that our rural areas don't get the same attention. And I'm here referring to Laingsburg, sorry,
Order, Honourable Mackenzie.
So remember Maseko. I'm talking Laingsburg,
Yes.
Beaufort West, Vredendal, and part of our big challenges in this regard has been our communication. Because, Maseko must stop doing it, please. A part of our big challenges, sorry about it, Minister, through you, has been our communication challenges, given that in...
Order, Chair.
Order, please, Deputy Speaker, please help me here. Member Maseko, please stop doing it.
Honourable Member Maseko, I don't know what you're doing, but I can't see.
Okay.
Honourable
Has been
Mackenzie.
through, I do apologize, has been our communications with people from the West Coast, Langebaan, Vredendal, etc. And there has been a language barrier. And does the communication strategy from the department through the mobility and access take into account English, Afrikaans, and Xhosa? Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Deputy Speaker. Well, to answer this question, I mean, I will answer it in threefold. I agree, Member Mackenzie, that the focus, it might seem as if the focus is in the metro because 70% of the population is here. But I'm sure you might have noticed that I've now embarked on a province-wide engagement with the industry. In fact, a month ago, I was in the Garden Route, and last week I went back there to respond to some of the concerns. And I have it on my diary, remember, where I will be visiting all the districts. I mean, the next one is Cape Winelands. And of course, part of the reason why I've categorized them in that manner, Member Mackenzie, is to look at where the challenges are. I mean, if you look at the situation, for example, in George, around Go George, and the protests that have been happening there, And that is why I started in that region. And the next one is Cape Winelands. There are challenges in areas like Ceres, and that is my next stop. And of course, I will then go to all other regions. So it's part of our communication strategy, because while, of course, we communicate through our adverts and also our pamphlets, but I'm a strong believer in engaging people face to face. And I think we are able to get the message across better when we meet with the industry face to face. Of course, we are being cautious. We understand that there's a new norm in terms of how we must behave. We must adhere to the health guidelines. And that is exactly what I will be doing, Member Mackenzie, to make sure that we just don't focus in the metro, but take the communication to all the districts, as I've done already with the Garden Road district. So that is what we'll be doing in all the districts, Member Mackenzie. So I'm sure we will also be going to areas like Lingsbeck and Beaufort West. So rest assured that I will be going to those areas.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any follow-up questions? I recognize Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the answer, Minister. Minister, with regards to the mobility strategy, and generally when we speak, we do talk about the taxi industry, but we do forget the transporting of the learners. And I just wanted to get clarity, and you did indicate that the regulations is probably going to come out soon from the national minister. What's the difference between filling up a taxi to a certain percentage and filling up a school bus to a certain percentage? And how does that potentially, because the question is relating to the pandemic and we are in the pandemic, how does that relate to possibly, and Chairperson, I use the word possibly very conservatively, an increase in numbers in the future? And does your strategies take that into account going forward? And lastly, Chairperson, when you responded, you referred mainly to the districts like Langebaan and Beaufort West. How does the strategy affect places like Merweville, Melkootfontein, and all the other very small towns that we generally do not get to? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Before you answer, I just want to say that time is almost up, so if you could keep your answers succinct, that would really be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. On the first question, I must be frank and be honest with you, Member Mackenzie, that the decision that was taken to load the taxis to full capacity, I mean, it was really a contest between science and economy. And I think the economic consideration trumped science, because, I mean, it is really not based on science. Because if we're talking about social distancing and then at the same time load taxes 100%, I mean, there's a contradiction there. But I must also say that it's a decision that I supported because I don't want to sound as if when this decision was made and announced by the minister, I'm now singing a different tune. My view is that we will really have to learn to live with this virus because eventually things will get back to normal, and we need to take precautionary measures, save life, but also save livelihoods. And I think really, if you look at the fact that the loading capacity of taxis is 100% and the buses still remain at 70%, as I said, that decision was not based on science. And I think very soon we will hear a pressure coming from the buses as well. I think the only difference, though, Member Mackenzie, is that where we are directly involved with the province in your Go George and GAPS, which will go in our buses, that they are subsidized, and that is why you don't hear a lot of complaint when they are continuing to load 70%, because they are subsidized, but the taxes are not, and that is why you have that disparity. That's where the challenge is. On your second part, it is a very difficult question to answer because the transport in those areas, I mean, it is a huge issue that there's a gap. I mean, I acknowledge that there's a gap that we need to address. And the same strategy in the limited transport that is available there, the same strategy will have to be followed in terms of our communication strategy and our transport strategy that we are implementing across the province. But of course, we understand that the situation there is really, really bad. There are areas where really transport is almost non-existent. And it's a gap that we really need to fill going forward. And it will require, of course, a lot of resources and partnerships. And I think it's a discussion for another time, Deputy Speaker. I mean, Member Mackenzie, through you, Deputy Speaker. So that's all I can say. But I think the strategy will apply across the province in all the areas. But we do, of course, understand that even before the pandemic, you always, a number of areas where transport has always been a challenge.
Thank you very much, Minister. That brings us to the end of the questions. We are now going to start with the opportunity for members to do the statements. I recognize the DA.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Chair, the province and the country at large face the challenge of defeating a culture of violence and entitlement by a select few. It is this culture of violence and perverse attitude of entitlement that fuels domestic abuse, gender-based violence, corruption, and fraud, amongst other social ills. The culture further perpetuates a cycle of patriarchy, as exemplified just this week when a teenage entrepreneur, Asipe Kefa, was threatened by taxi drivers because she dared to start a taxi business. Asipe nevertheless bravely continues her woman-only taxi service based in Nyanga and remains unshaken in the face of what is often brutal entitlement in a male-dominated industry. Honourable Chair, turning to the inner city of the Cape Metro, we further witnessed violence and entitlement through the significant rise in extortion and racketeering against bars, restaurants, and coffee shops. This is by opportunistic gang leaders seeking so-called protection fees. Such efforts are exceptionally alarming, given that we need to safely move our economy forward, and the efforts of small business such as these is incredibly important in doing so. We cannot have an environment, Chair, where business owners lack assurance of safety for both their staff and customers. It is evident, Honourable Chair, that the Western Cape government proactively work to defeat the scourge of violence, including within the taxi industry. The initiation of talks between the Department of Transport and Public Works, as well as taxi bodies, Cadeta and Kata, is testament to this. Given the current second pandemic of poverty, we need to get our residents safely back to work and the economy moving again. And there is no doubt that safe taxi operation plays a huge role in this. In conclusion, Honourable Chair, it is only through the efforts of government at all levels, civil society, the private and public sectors, and all residents that we can collectively combat violence so atrociously embedded in our social fibres. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Michel. I now recognize ANC. I now recognize ANC.
Thank you very much, Chair.
We can hear you.
Okay. Chairperson, I rise today to sympathize with the family of Nosicelo Nosange Tsipa, a member of the ANC Women's League who was murdered and buried in a damp area by her husband in Fisanti Kraal. We welcome swift response by SARS The accused has been arrested and appeared in court on the 11th of September. The crime against women in South Africa report by State South Africa showed that the rate of murder of women in South Africa is unacceptable. Is unacceptably high compared to the global average. In his letter from the desk of the President this week acknowledged that the women of South Africa have had enough of lukewarm actions that do not address one of the most fundamental rights for all. To live in freedom from fear, the President also said that the law is the one sure protector of all society, and when diligently and fairly applied, it is the most powerful guarantee of justice. In this regard, 3 key bills relating to gender-based violence have been introduced in Parliament. The ANC welcomes the introduction of these bills and salutes the President for following through and commitment made at the joint sitting of Parliament on the 18th September 2019. National Parliament must expedite the process of passing them. These bills will fill the gaps that allow perpetrators to evade justice. They include the bill to amend the criminal law, sexual offenses and related matters. Amendment Act, it will expand the scope of the National Register for
Honorable Member, your time is up.
To include the particular of all sex offenders. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Bagufos. I now recognize EFF. Okay, EFF is not in the house. My apologies, Honorable Members. I now recognize DA.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the recent attempt by the ANC at Cederberg Municipality to stop the search and seizure operation of the Special Investigation Unit on Monday, 14 September 2020, has highlighted the opposition party's disregard for the residents of Cederberg. The municipality attempted to interdict this SIU from carrying out its constitutional mandate. This resulted in that the SIU had to obtain a court order to carry out its constitutional duties. It is alleged that the member of this House, Honorable Danville Smith, instructed the ANC caucus at a hastily convened special council meeting not to cooperate with the law enforcement agencies and to destroy all evidence that may expose acts of fraud and corruption. This is against the Constitution and certainly against the oath of office of a member of this House. Chairperson, in 2017, under DA control, the municipality achieved its first ever clean audit. This changed hands in good financial health to the ANC. In 2019, 1 year later, it is being investigated for fraud, corruption, and a host of other offences. The ANC is more concerned with looting and pocketing of money than it is for the lives and well-being of the residents of Cederberg. Chairperson, many unqualified cadres at exorbitant salaries were appointed without due process being followed. Furthermore, the municipality owes several millions to Eskom, even though residents continue to pay for services. Corruption, mismanagement, unlawful appointments of cadres is the norm under ANC rule, resulting that the municipality...
Honourable Member, finish up your last sentence.
Collapse. In conclusion, for the sake of the people living in the Cederberg, clean governance, respect for the rule of law needs to be restored urgently. I thank you.
What happened
Thank
to
you
the
very
alcohol
much,
and salt?
Honorable America.
Chair, I had my hand up for a while now for a point of order, Chair.
Okay, my apologies, Honorable Member. What is the point of order?
My point of order was: is it parliamentary, and possibly you could rule on this matter, for the Honourable America to cast aspersions on the Honourable Smith? Should he not be bringing a substantive motion on this matter? I thank you.
Honorable Member, it's not up to me about the statement to say that if it's a substantive motion, it will have to come, but I will do the consultation with the table staff to hear if there's any cast aspersions to that statement, and then I'll revert back to you. Thank you very much. I now recognize Good.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, this government's commitment in its vision-inspired Priority 1 is to fund, train and deploy 3,000 law enforcement officers and investigators in the areas of the highest crime rates. And this Parliament was asked to support a budget allocation of 1.3 billion over the next 3 years to fund the boots on the ground component of the so-called safety plan. But we already know that the safety plan is not being implemented as promised. Despite promising 3,000 law enforcement officers, the Cabinet ultimately agreed to fund only 1,000. Despite promising law enforcement officers, the Cabinet ultimately agreed to fund only learner law enforcement officers. And these learner law enforcement officers are being deployed into communities without having completed their training. Is the massive 1.3 billion project really going to create safe and cohesive communities? In January this year, a South African police officer was shot dead by a City of Cape Town law enforcement officer on Herengracht in the city centre. And in July this year, 3 City of Cape Town law enforcement officers used their law enforcement credentials and their law enforcement vehicle to stage a house robbery in Mitchell's Plain. On top of this, we've also received complaints about illegal training methods, where recruits have been required to handle firearms without the necessary training. This past weekend, a new recruit to law enforcement, no doubt funded by our 1.3 billion, was instructed to take part in a training session at Indabeni. This new recruit was injured by the facilitator, who discharged a shotgun inside a shipping container. He was apparently and inexplicably demonstrating what a live shotgun round sounds like inside a shipping container. The information we have is that the training facility is not even accredited for firearm training. Recently, the National Police Commissioner raised questions about the competency certificates of the City of Cape Town's law enforcement officers. So do we have law enforcement officers out on the streets using firearms without proper training? And how do we place inexperienced learner law enforcement officers in our murder capitals and expect them to survive and also to make us safer? How is it that law enforcement officers who exit the service retain their uniforms, badges and credentials, allowing them to pose as law enforcement officers whenever they want to? Clearly, we need answers about the competency, not of the officers, but of those trained or those assigned to train and develop them. Law enforcement operates on a rank system, and if you want the title of Chief Commander, you must take the responsibility. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Heron. I now recognize ACDP.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the ACDP, African Christian Democratic Party, is appalled by the fact that even at a COVID-19 patient isn't safe from sexual abuse. Speaker, the ACDP is referring to a recent article which highlighted an alleged rape of a 20-year-old COVID-19 patient at a quarantine facility near Mossel Bay. The woman was in a room when the suspect, which is a cleaner at the facility, entered and raped her. The matter was later reported to the medical personnel, which informed the police. The 27-year-old suspect is currently on trial in the Mossel Bay Magistrate Court. Speaker, the ACDP would like to commend the medical personnel, the police for their quick response, as well as the victim for being brave to report the crime, so the criminal can be brought to book. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I now recognize ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson, the ANC welcomes the SIU investigation into alleged PPE tender irregularities at municipalities. We call on all municipalities to cooperate and provide the SIU with all the information and support required. Chairperson, on another investigation, the SIU is probing the WCED for paying one company, Masakrame Trading, 1057cc, 99.8% of the entire department's PPE spending. The MEC grandstand in the media to call on ANC to work with him to tackle corruption and ensuring good governance. If indeed this is true, Chairperson, why are these investigations targeting only ANC-run municipalities, specific Matsikama and Cederberg? Chairperson, alleged irregularities in DA-run municipalities are ignored. Swartland municipality spent over 73 million in its relief program, including 265,000 spent on 77 food parcel, Chairperson, for soup kitchens, yet there is no investigation. In the past, we raised allegations of electricity fraud over 2 million and other financial misconduct by officials at Bergrivier municipality. This was also not investigated. Dololo, nothing. How can we forget the 53 million was spent on the Strandfontein concentration camp by the city of Cape Town, which include the hiring of tents for 48.4 million for a 6-week period. Chairperson, 6-week period. Therefore, in welcoming these investigations and MEC's call, we further call for these to be extended to other municipalities in the Western Cape, specific those run by the DA. The fact that all these DA shenanigans have been ignored suggests that there is a witch hunt by MEC Bradell and his HOD and other senior officials. There is a clear evidence of political meddling by the MEC to protect DA councillors while
Honourable Member, your time is up.
Example is the MEC concurring with the recommendations of council to
Honourable
expel
Member,
ANC councillor Burry, yet he
your
blocked
time
the
is
removal
up.
of former Cederberg Mayor William Joseph, following a council disciplinary for the
Because you
same
can't hear.
transgression. The MEC must tell the
Honourable
House
Member,
what
your
is
time
for
is
the
up.
We can all do that.
Mute.
Thank you
Maybe she
very
can't
much,
hear.
Honourable Member. I
Can hear
now
you.
recognize the DA.
Yeah.
House Chair, with Cape Town dams almost full, it is easy to forget that we faced running out of water as recently as April 2018. It's easy to forget how quickly the drought struck after 2014, when our dams were also overflowing. Our dam levels improved spectacularly, despite us consistently experiencing below average rainfall figures since 2014. As at the end of last month, August 2020, and despite this August rainfall figures being particular, the Boland was still 13 millimeters below the average rainfall for the year to date. No wonder that large areas of our province are still in the grip of a serious drought. Why is it then that the Cape Town dam levels have improved so much, despite these below average rainfall figures? The biggest factor in the recovery of our dam levels has been the careful use of water by consumers, both urban consumers and farmers alike. Thanks to the continued cooperation of consumers, we've seen previously unthinkable savings in consumption. Cape Townians have, during the last summers in some months, saved up to 50% when compared to historic consumption. The awareness campaign, known by many as the Day Zero campaign, is still having its positive effect. Many citizens are still collecting the water in their showers in a tray and for reuse. Those that could afford it installed grey water systems or are using water in water tanks to flush toilets. I wish to thank each and every member of the public for still using water sparingly. Let us learn from the past and continue on this path. As the Department of Local Government and MEC Bradell used to say, let us save water while there is still water to save. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I now recognize Freedom Front Plus. Honorable Member Marais, are you with us?
Yes, I am. The Freedom Front Plus notes that the Western Cape has achieved the highest recovery rate from COVID-19 in the country. Currently, this figure stands at 93.6%. We've also taken note of the fact that a 40% reduction in new infections were achieved in the Cape Metro. The whole society approach adopted by the Western Cape Health Department in delivering a comprehensive service succeeded in flattening the curve through inter alia, stringent and extensive serological testing and surveillance. This proves that devolution of powers to the provinces without central government interference can produce positive results to the benefit of all its citizens. We therefore applaud the Premier and the head of department, Dr. Kluti, and his department for their bold decisions and initiatives in this regard. We also applaud the Western Cape citizens for adhering more and for longer periods to these restrictions imposed and exercising such great discipline. Thank you.
And Minister Mbombo.
Thank you very much. I now recognize DA.
Honorable Chair, on 10 September, Minister Gwede Mantashe announced that the National Energy Regulator South Africa had provided its concurrence to Section 34 ministerial determinations, which will provide for the procurement of 11,813 megawatts of new electricity capacity, which will come online in 2022, including 6,800 megawatts for wind and solar, 513 megawatts from storage, 3,000 megawatts from gas. This will allow for the opening up of bid window 5 of renewable energy. With our country facing the dire effect of a second pandemic of economic decline and job losses, I hope that Minister Mantashe wastes no time in publishing the determinations which can kickstart the procurement of cleaner energy options. Given that these determinations were initially published in February of this year, NERSA should have fast-tracked the approval of energy security and is a top priority for keeping businesses online. We cannot afford to let a single factory or a neighborhood of people working from home go dark. We welcome this move and further encourage that in the short term, Minister Mantashe should approve the City of Cape Town's application to buy electricity directly from IPPs. The Western Cape already houses 12 renewable energy projects in terms of IPPs and head offices of 89 renewable energy companies. Further, NERSA should increase the threshold for registering small-scale embedded generation for own use of under 1 megawatt to 10 megawatts without the requirement of having a license. Every household that is financially capable to do so should be allowed to assist us in making the Western Cape energy secure and help bring power back to the people. Chairperson, I thank you.
Amandla.
Thank you very much. In terms of Rule 145 of 6, I'm now giving one minister present an opportunity to respond to the member statements for not more than 5 minutes. Is there any minister who's going to take the opportunity? Okay, in the silence, that seems there's no any minister who's going to take that opportunity.
Hello?
Okay, I recognize you, Minister Fritz.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Chairperson?
Yes, I can hear you. We can all hear you, Minister.
I will be responding. Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, I welcome yesterday's engagement with the Minister of Police, Becky Cele, Deputy Minister Castle Matale, Alderman J.P. Smith, National Commissioner General Sitoli, Acting Provincial Commissioner Acting Provincial Commissioner General Mansi, Head of National Intelligence and National Police Intelligence, General Jacobs, the Head of Hawks, General Libya, and we really want to just say all other generals from SAPS regarding the extortion of business in Cape Town, CBD and surrounds. And I also want to point out that the extortion of businesses has also been reported in places like Khayelitsha and other areas in the Western Cape. Speaker, the meeting was deemed urgent because we cannot allow criminal syndicates to continue acting with impunity while jobs, economic activity, and livelihoods are under enormous pressure due to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown. Cape Town CBD and surrounds employ huge numbers of people in industries, including tourism, entertainment, services, and related businesses. The spate of extortion and intimidation further leaves businesses and patrons feeling hugely unsafe. The presence of these syndicates poses a direct threat to these businesses and to foreign direct investments and will really not be tolerated within this province. I am pleased to state that the meeting was held in an extremely positive atmosphere. There was consensus on the need for maximum cooperation and integration between all spheres of government related to law enforcement and relevant state agencies to tackle the scourge of extortion and gangsterism, syndicate gangsterism, Madam Chair, head on. We also want to indicate that we resolved to immediately establish a transversal steering committee that would spearhead the development and implementation of a comprehensive anti-extortion plan, but also an anti-syndicate criminal plan that will deal with all criminal activities by any form of syndicates, including the issue of perlamun, of drug smuggling, and of course of these extortions. The Intergovernmental Steering Committee is set up not to only to tackle extortion, as I indicated in the CBD, but to also address all other organized crimes in the province. This includes extortion-related activity in areas such as Khayelitsha, in Gugulethu, in Mufuleni, in Mitchell's Plain, also on the farms in the Philippi horticultural area. And this is a real ugly animal being, that's sticking out its head in the province. This includes extortion-related activity in Khayelitsha, organized crime links to smuggling of drugs, perlamun, and all other organized crime syndicates in the province. I also want to, in this statement, just remind the Honorable Helen that every single certificate of compliance and competency of every law enforcement officer has been handed over to the National Police Commissioner on time, on the deadline that it was asked for. And I can tell you that meeting that took place in such a good spirit was because everything was compliant and everything was in order. I thank you, Madam Speaker. Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Fritz. That concludes the member statements. We are now going to move to the notices of motion. I have been informed that in the Programming Authority meeting of the 25th August 2020, it was resolved that political parties would submit the names of honorable members in the desired order of speaking and who wish to move motions with notice in this sitting of the House. I will therefore recognize honorable members whose names have accordingly been submitted, alternating between the majority party and opposition parties. I now recognize Honorable Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I move a motion with notice that this House considers the double standards with which the DA governs in this province and municipalities as the Honorable Premier Ellen Windy on the one hand wants all protective measures of the health pandemic removed. Yet, that party keeps ideological measures of control and even wants to limit calls for prayers under its notorious nuisance bylaws. I so move.
Honorable Member Smith, we are doing the notices of motions, not the motions without notice. I am now going to move to Honorable Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the ACDP moves that the House debates the ongoing taxi-related murders. I so move.
Thank you very much, Honorable Christians. Moving notices of motion, I now recognize Honorable Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance with notice that this House debates the state of trains, rail infrastructure and the safety of commuters in the Western Cape. I so move.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Honorable Kama.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the ANC, I move a motion with notice that this House debates the double standards by the DA in this legislature that fights all lockdown regulations aiding the bringing down of devastating alcohol-related crime and injuries. Yet the Honorable Premier Alan Windy on radio this week admits these measures and regulations did bring down this type of violence. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize Honorable van der Westhuizen.
House Chair, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move a motion with notice that this House debates the impact of the ongoing drought in some parts of the Western Cape on food security, as well as its impact on the local economies of rural communities. Speaker, the drought has now been declassified by national government as a national disaster, despite severe challenges still faced in areas such as the Karoo. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize again Honorable Kama.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Chair? On behalf of the ANC, I move a motion with notice that the House debates and examines the use of the Western Cape Safety Plan LEAP officers in land invasions or evictions and its impact on the fight against crime.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I now recognize Honorable America.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move with notice that the House, 1, notes the serious allegation of fraud against a member of this House, Member Daniel Smith of the ANC. 2, notes that this alleged fraudulent action relates to food parcel distribution within the Cederberg municipality. Thirdly, notes that the criminal case was laid with the Hawks fraud case number 35/08/2020. And fourthly, it agrees to refer the matter to the Public Protector for investigation. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize Honorable Smith.
Chair, our Chief Whip has a hand up. I think, yeah, I see the Chief Whip's hand up, Chair.
Also the Honorable
I'm going
Kama's
to
hands.
recognize Honorable Chief Whip of the Opposition Party first, Honorable Lecker. My apologies.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings, everyone. Chair, I wish to bring your attention to a fact that Member America needs to bring a substantive motion in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
House Chair.
I'm listening.
Thank you, House
Honorable
Chair.
Wenger.
If the Honourable Lecker listened carefully, she would have noted that it is a motion with notice and therefore it is a substantive motion.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party. I will now recognize Honorable Lecker again. Honorable Lecker, is it the old hand? Can I recognize Honorable Kama in your absentia?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I need your indulgence. Earlier, when Member Smith moved a motion with notice, you just ruled that we are dealing with motions without notice. And I had assumed maybe that might be in relation to the structure of the motion that he has moved. But now that motion is in no way different to the motion that is moved by Member America, but you are, in this case of Member America, accepting the motion as it is. I would like, Chair, to request that you perhaps look at Hansard and really apply your mind in the motion that was applied by Member Smith, because I believe that it does fit the required structure as he had given it with notice. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, when Honorable Member Smith did the motion, it was the motion without notice. Who is interjecting?
It's Pat Lecker. I had my hand up and I don't know what happened.
Okay, I will recognize you just now, Honorable Member. Let me address Honorable Kama first, and then I'll come back to you. Honorable Member Kama, like I was saying that Honorable Smith moved the motion without notice. And I said...
No, Chair.
And if it was not the motion without notice, then I need to recognize that and recognize it as the motion with notice.
Chair,
Can I
clearly
recognize you, Honorable Lecker?
Thank you, Chair. Greetings once again. Indeed, Member Denville moved a motion with notice when he first spoke. To Chair, I wish to actually indeed appeal to your conscience that you probably consult the table staff instead of listening to the Chief Whip of the Majority Party and allowing her to guide you on how you must rule on this matter. Thank you.
I really appreciate your advice, Honorable Member, but I will appreciate if we can continue with the more notices of motion so that I can hear without any interjection.
What is your ruling, Chair, in
Honorable...
relation to the motion raised by Member America? You have not spoken about your ruling.
Yeah, Honorable Lecker, if I can recognize you, is then that you will be able to hear if what is it that I'm going to say after you have spoken. So when you interject immediately after you have spoken, it's difficult for you to know what is it that I'm going to say or anticipate what is it that I'm going to say beforehand. So allow me to come back to the notice of motion by Honorable America. But I see the hand of Honorable Wenger first. Can I recognize you, Chief Whip?
Thank you very much, House Chair. In the definitions of the standing rules, it says that a substantive motion is a proposal for separate consideration by the House, including a motion relating to any allegation against a member, in accordance with Rule 59.2. And that is precisely what Honourable America did in a motion with notice. So therefore, it is our view that it was procedural in the way that it was presented.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wenger. We'll revert back to the two motions that are in question of Honorable Smith and Honorable America after consultation with the table staff. Can we continue with the notices of motion? I now recognize Honorable Smith. Whilst Honorable Smith is trying to connect, can I recognize Honorable Syed?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I move with notice that this House debates why the Democratic Alliance hides behind so-called quality education whenever it is confronted with the vast unequal education in the Western Cape. I so move.
Thank you very much. Honorable Syed, again, it's your chance.
Honorable Chair, I move with notice that this legislature debates the DA's attempt to evade public scrutiny and accountability on the Public Service Commission's investigative report on the extension of employment for the Education Head of Department beyond retirement age. I so move.
Thank you very much. Honorable Smith, I
Yes,
recognize
Chair.
you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, I move a motion with notice that, where is this motion now? Give me a second, Chair. Yes, that this legislature debates the way the Honorable Local Government MEC, Anton Brodel, recently ill-treated two women, namely Cedarburg Mayor Sylvia Gunta and Matsikama Mayor Matilda Baines, with a view to demand of the Honorable Premier, Alan Windy, to discipline the MEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Honorable members, I just want to remind the members that in the past there was a notice of motion which was substantive as previously ruled on by the presiding officer. I think it was the motion that was brought in by Honorable Doug Moore by the Deputy Speaker. And there was no any objection in that regard. So to the motion that Honorable Smith have brought in is the same. The motion that Honorable America also brought in is the same. There was no any objection to that. So I hope the precedence that was said that it will continue as it is now. That brings us to the conclusion of the motions, the notices of motions. We are going to move on to the motions without notice. I now recognize Honorable Maran.
Thanks, House Chair. On behalf of the African National Congress, a motion without notice that this legislature sends condolences to the Brede Valley Municipality, family and friends of Brede Valley Deputy Mayor John Levendal, who died yesterday morning after a short illness. I so moved.
Is there any objection to the motion? The motion agreed to. I now recognize Honorable Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the ACDP would like to extend our condolences to the bereaved families of the 29-year-old Desmond Koba and the 23-year-old Johanni Canterbury. Chairperson, the ACDP is referring to the two that were involved in a car accident in Alsis River. Desmond, who has just celebrated the birth of his son a few days ago, before a tragic car accident took his life. It was believed that they were on their way heading to Kentucky Fried Chicken. No one knows who was the driver of the car, which led up to the accident. Johanni, who was flung out of the car and was pinned down by an oncoming vehicle, said his last words to his mother before passing away. A 3-year-old boy named Mason was also in the car, but was protected by another survivor and was discharged from hospital. Speaker, Our prayers and thoughts is with the families. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognize the Honourable America.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I moved on behalf of the Democratic Alliance without notice that this House notes with dismay that the ANC-led administration at Cederberg Municipality interfered with the work of the Special Investigative Unit on taking a resolution in the Special Council meeting held on the 14th of September 2020. Deputy Speaker, through their purposeful interference to interdict the SIU so they would not be able to fulfill their task, a message is sent that accountability and transparency does not exist in that ANC-led administration. Deputy Speaker, that this House further notes that the SIU had to obtain a court order to execute a search and seizure operation in the Cederberg municipality on Monday, 14 September 2020. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Smith, I see your hand is still up. Can I just check exactly why your hand is up?
Objecting.
No, I object, Chairperson.
Okay, and the objection is noted. That will be printed on the order paper. I now recognise Honourable Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Freedom Front Plus, I move without notice that this House recommends that the desirability and the feasibility of outsourcing the dispensing of chronic and other medicines to accredited pharmacists throughout the Western Cape be investigated to ease the burden on clinics and hospitals who cannot cope with the ever-increasing number of patients and the issue of social distancing. This will allow nurse aides to only visit and deliver medicines to elderly and handicapped patients, as well as testing their blood pressures, sugar levels, and keeping medical records of their general state of health. These nurse aides would also be able to report whether there are signs of neglect, malnutrition, or abuse of the elderly. I further move that the Minister of Health in the Western Cape and her department prepare a report in this regard for further consideration by this House. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Objections. There are objections. The motion will be printed on the order paper.
It's the DA, Honourable
I recognise Honourable Moran.
Deputy Speaker, namens die motie sonder kennisgewings namens die ANC, dat die hy sy medelee stuur aan die familie, vriende en drywerboere gemeenskap in die Heksvallei met die afsterwe van die 74-jarige Stefans Rousseau, wie vermoedelijk op 10 September aan 'n hartaanval gesterf het. Dankie.
Speaker, can I ask a question?
Sorry,
Speaker, for the question.
Honourable Moran, did you disappear after you just made the statement? Honourable Murray, is there a point of order? You can't ask a question, but if there's a point of order, I'm willing to hear you.
No, I just wanted clarity. I'm not sure. I heard bubbling.
Yeah.
Was there objections to my motion?
There was an objection to your motion. That is correct, Honourable Murray, and it will be printed on the order paper. Can I please go back to Honourable Moran? I think he broke up there straight after I heard that he had a heart attack. If you could just continue from there, Honourable Moran.
Speaker, laat ek liewer oor begin. Speaker, mosie sonder kennisgewing namens die ANC dat die huis sy medelee stuur aan die familie, vriende en drywerboere gemeenskap in die Heksvallei met die afsterwe van die 74-jarige drywerboer Stefanus Rousseau, wie vermoedelik op 10 September aan 'n hartaanval gesterf het. Dankie.
Okay. Baie dankie, agbare lid. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognize Honourable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I hereby move without notice on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes the current turmoil at the Western Cape High Court over public allegations of improper conduct, undue interference, assassination plots, and nepotism, acknowledges that a strong, united judiciary is vital for the effective functioning of our country, and calls on the Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng, to intervene to restore the dignity and proper functioning of the Western Cape High Court in the interest of justice and democracy. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognize Honourable Moran.
Murray or Moran, Deputy Speaker?
My apologies, Moran.
Thank you very much. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the People's Movement, the African National Congress, a motion without notice that this House notes the utter failure of the Western Cape Housing or Human Settlements Department over the last 6 years for its failure to build houses on 1,000 service plots in the dwellings. I so moved.
Thank you, Honourable Member. There are objections in the chamber. The motion will be printed on the order paper. I now recognise Honourable Wenger.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance without notice that the House extends its deepest condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Cedric Schilder, the father of Ms. Noreen Schilder, who serves members of this House. Mr. Schilder passed away yesterday, the 16th of September 2020, at the age of 77. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Schilder spent 31 years of his life as a trawler fisherman, and before retirement, he served at the Meadow Ridge Primary School in Lentegeur. Mr. Schilder will be fondly remembered as a real giant of care, one who spent his last days with his loving family. Our hearts go out to Ms. Noreen Schilder and trust that the family will find comfort in the legacy left behind by Mr. Cedric Schilder. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognise Honourable Moran.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the African National Congress, a motion without notice that this House notes vast quantities of cigarettes and alcohol confiscated under the COVID-19 protective lockdown period by the Saldanha Bay municipality has disappeared without a trace and calls for a full report on this occurrence. I so move.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Philander.
Agbare adjunk Speaker, namens die Demokratiese Alliansie, dra ek 'n mosie van medelee in dat die huis met hartseer kennis neem van die afsterwe van raadslid John Lewendal, onderburgemeester van die Bredevallei munisipaliteit, binne weke tydens die afsterwe van sy geliefde vrou Koekie. Onderburgemeester Lewendal was 'n skoolprinsipaal in die Heksriviervallei alvorens hy gedien het as burgemeester van die Dorings munisipaliteit in 1995. Ontslape onderburgemeester Lewendal het gedien in sy hoedanigheid in die Bredevallei munisipaliteit sedert 2011 en was wel bekend in die landelike gemeenskap waar hy noemenswaardige verhoudinge opgebou het met landbouers en werkers in die area. Ek dra so in dat die huis ons innige meegevoel en simpatie aan die Lewendal en uitgebreide families oordra, aan kollegas en vriende, en ons wens hulle alle sterkte toe in die moeilike tyd. Ons sal eer onder burgemeester Lewenthal vir sy leierskapsrol, die passie vir sy gemeenskap en sy geloofwaardige liefde vir die gemeenskap van die Breede Vallei. Mag sy siel in vrede rus. Ek dra so in.
Dankie, achtbare lid. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this legislature welcomes the establishment of self-help organizations like Sustainable Buka that are aimed at building self-reliant community-based food gardens, and that we encourage all spheres of government to support such efforts. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Wenger.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move that this House condemns the abuse of state resources by the African National Congress for the purposes of an official visit to Zimbabwe and for flouting COVID-19 lockdown regulations, calls on the ANC to remember the importance of the separation of party and state in our democracy, welcomes the commitment by the guilty ANC officials to pay back the money which they stole from the state, and calls on the ANC to remain committed to the principles of the Constitution and to ending their project of state capture, which has deprived millions of South Africans of their dignity and human rights. I so move.
Object. Thank you, Member.
Object.
Okay. There are objections. The motion will be printed on the order paper. I recognise Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this legislature condemns the religious intolerance, bigotry, and toxic masculinity that was displayed last week in Paarl when a man attacked a Muslim woman, tried to remove her veil, and abused her verbally, and calls on investigators to deal with such criminals. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Bosman.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move that this House notes with sadness the passing of architect Javi Fagan. He is acknowledged by his contemporaries as one of South Africa's first architects of the 20th century, with numerous awards for his work, which include honorary doctorates from the University of the Free State, the University of Stellenbosch, the Gold Medal of Honor from the South African Institute of Architects, the University of Pretoria's Chancellor's Award, and the City of Cape Town's Civic Honours. He was known not only for his original architectural work, which influenced generations of architects, but together with his wife Gwen, for his conservation work, which included the restoration of 24 historical houses in the town of Tilbach that had been devastated by an earthquake. Over time, they would become leading experts on the conservation and restoration of Cape Dutch era architecture. Javi and Gwen were leading advocates for a movement to prevent the foreshore highways from being completed and destroying a vital section of Cape Town's built environment, which centered on Heritage Square and extended into Boerkaap. They would go on to lobby for the restoration of the waterfront to the city's residents, which ultimately culminated in the world-famous V&A waterfront development. I move that this House extends our sincere condolences to the friends, colleagues, and family of Javi Fagan, and in Heritage Month that we acknowledge his incredible contribution to the preservation and restoration of our historical built environment. I so move.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognise Honourable Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move a motion without notice that this House notes local government MEC Anton Padel is about to abandon the sinking Western Cape DA ship with him at the helm as provincial chairman. Also notes that he rather avails himself now as a DA federal chairperson. And lastly notes this sudden change of heart comes only after it was revealed he appointed Agriculture MEC Ivan Meyer's son in a senior strategic position within the provincial administration. I so move.
Object. Thank you. There are objections in the chambers.
Really?
The motion will be printed on the order paper. Order, members. Order. I now recognise Honourable Bartman.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move that this House notes that there's been a decline of 67% in the tourism and hospitality sector in the country, with job losses estimated at over 100,000 in the Western Cape due to the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown regulations. Acknowledges that the City of Cape Town and Western Cape has over the last 10 years hosted the most international association conferences in Africa, with the Western Cape having hosted 57 international association meetings with approximately 21,000 delegates and an average of 3.6 days per event, with international congresses in 2019. Recognizes that in 2019 fiscal year, the City of Cape Town and Western Cape Convention Bureau secured bids with an estimated economic impact of 1 billion rand for this province. Also notes that yesterday, 16 September, President Ramaphosa announced that international borders will open on 1 October, with the exception of high-risk COVID-19 countries, and welcomes the promise of a defined date for our borders to open and the Western Cape's strong commitment to safe and responsible tourism, which was reflected in the award of the Safe Travel Stamp by the World Travel and Tourism Council. I so move.
Member, are there any objections to the motion be moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this House notes the Witsun community is victorious in its long fight for a new primary and temporary secondary school in the area of Atlantis, as the Education Department has approved a temporary school from next year onwards, and that the House encourages learners to grab hold of this opportunity to improve their education and urges the government to ensure that water and electricity is operational from next year. I so move.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion be moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Bosman.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes the celebration of Heritage Day on the 25th of September next week, that this House recognizes that the diverse cultural and traditions held here in the Western Cape encourages the celebration of these diverse cultures and heritage and its contribution to South Africa as a rainbow nation, and that this House further notes that this is what makes our democracy unique and that such a celebration promotes social cohesion. I so move.
Member, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable America.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move without notice that this House notes, excuse me, that this House notes of the 8 metros poll, Cape Town once again emerged as the best performing metro in the country on an overall citizen satisfaction survey. The City of Cape Town has achieved the highest score for the 7th consecutive year. Deputy Speaker, South African Citizen Satisfaction Index report conducted by a consultant showed that Cape Town has the smallest gap in terms of what citizens perceive and receive through service delivery. Deputy Speaker, that this House congratulates the City of Cape Town and its staff as it continues to lead the way and put the residents' needs at the top of its priority list. I so move.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Are there any objections?
Object.
There are objections. The motion will be printed on the order paper. I recognise Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this House notes the long battle that a learner in Hermanus encountered at the Kuro private institution with a school bully, and now wants to be transferred to a Kuro school in Cape Town to complete his matric in peace next year. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Bartman.
Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move that this House notes that Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, announced that the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, has provided its concurrence to Section 34 ministerial determinations. Further notes that this will provide for the procurement of 11,813 megawatts of new electricity capacity in terms of the 2019 IRP, which will be the next step in opening up the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program. Bid Window 5, the Gas Independent Power Producer Program and Energy Storage Procurement, recognizes that the Western Cape already houses 12 renewable energy IPP projects and head offices of 89 renewable energy companies, and calls upon Minister Mantashe to urgently sign and gazette the final Section 34 ministerial determinations, which will allow for a more energy secure future within the Western Cape and South Africa. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Kama.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the African National Congress, I move a motion without notice that this House notes the DA double standards when it comes to findings of institutions that are established to support democracy. That the same DA praised the Public Service Commission when it made findings against the South African police in the province, but now defies the recommendations of the very same Public Service Commission on the education HOD matter without even approaching a court to have the report findings set aside. And that this House notes the DA wants to make it a law unto itself. I so move.
Object. Go check
Thank you, Honourable Member. There are objections coming from the chambers. Your motion will be printed on the order paper. I recognise Honourable Philander.
Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move without notice that this House congratulates and extends our sincere appreciation to the CEO, Dr. Matotsi Mkhusi, all medical practitioners and staff at the Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital for the groundbreaking work they do at this world-class facility. Further notes that during COVID-19 pandemic, the hospital was able to absorb adolescent patients from other healthcare facilities. The House further extends appreciation to the Children's Hospital Trust and all the various donors who fervently support the facility, as we observed during our oversight visit on the 16th of September, and that this facility does not only offer healthcare but fosters the inclusive family bond and social assistance in endeavouring complete recovery. I so move, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Sayed.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that this House notes the complaints by the community about the overcrowded and understaffed Inkanini Primary School in Kalicha. Notes that these complaints were brought to the Speaker by the school governing body this week and calls for a full investigation by the Speaker and report back to this House on the complaint. I so move.
Objection.
Thank you, Honourable Member. There are objections coming from the chambers. Your motion will be printed on an order paper. I now recognise Honourable Windwurgel.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move without notice that this House note this week mark 6 months of the COVID-19 pandemic, held a measure under the emergency medical lockdown, and notes the Western Cape quickly led as a hotspot of infection and is up to date, still the leading province with a death rate of more than 4,000 people that die. I so move. Thank you.
Objection.
Honourable Member, of course we all heard that objection. The motion will be printed on the order paper. I recognise Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move without notice that this legislature wishes all matric learners well with the present preparation test before their final exam and expresses concern that a quarter of grade 12 learners have not returned to school as yet. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Objection.
Are there any
It's not
objections?
correct. The facts are not correct.
There are objections. Your motion will be printed on the order paper. Honourable Sayed, I recognise you again.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I move without notice that this House notes the unhappiness of the Crawford community over the construction of a new cell phone tower at the Thornton Road Primary School, and calls on the Western Cape Education Department to investigate the problem and to report back to this House. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections?
Yes.
Okay, there are objections to the motion being moved without notice. That be
Refusing to
recorded.
do their
Thank you
work.
very much, Deputy Chief Whip. I move on to Honourable Barnes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move without notice that this House notes famous cook Floris Schrikker of Bonteheuwel died after a heart bypass operation. She and Kulsum Kamali, who died earlier this year, regularly cooked together and even wrote a Cape cookbook, and that this House sends condolences to her family and friends. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. I move that this legislature notes the upsurge in violence, ill discipline, staff turnover, and poor academic performance at the Brooklyn Primary School in North Pine, which is allegedly due to poor management. That the school governing body has consistently raised these concerns with the Education Department and calls on the department to address this matter speedily. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? There are objections coming from the chambers. Your motion will be printed on the order paper. Honourable Baku Force.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
You may continue, Honourable Baku Force.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move without notice that this House knows the University of the Western Cape extended its numbers for almost 3,000 residents by taking into use a new 640 million hostel in Bela, 100 miles from the Belleville campus, and welcomes the step towards housing more students. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Van Voorgel.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move without notice that the House notes the Western Cape government wants to issue all emergency workers with body cameras recording the evidence, and workers who are regularly targets will get the equipment first, and it's done because of the growing number of attacks. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved? There are objections from the chambers. Your motion will be printed on the order paper. I recognise Honourable Lecker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the House commiserates with family, friends, and comrades of the PR Councillor of the ANC, Comrade Sbusi Sonko Miyahlaba, who died after a short illness. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Baku Force.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move that the House knows the latest GBV victim is a woman at a quarantine facility in Mossel Bay that was raped by a cleaner, and that the Provincial Department of Public Works moved the victim to another safer facility, and that SAPS investigate the incident. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Van Voorgel.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move on behalf of the ANC without notice that the House notes Paul Boys High pianist 13-year-old Mike Horn won a National High School Music Prize. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable members, just before I go on, I just want to ask that you remain online as I will deliver a ruling straight after the last motion without notice. I'll now move over to Honourable Barnes.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the African National Congress, I move without notice that the House appreciates police excellence in service by the Brigadier Tutuwe, Cluster Commander of Central Karoo, who went beyond the call of duty last week and successfully assisted in finding a young abducted girl in Swellendam outside the boundaries of his cluster. Further notes his speedy response and dedication to his work after working hours and applauds him for his excellent service. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion been moved without notice? No objection. Agreed to. Honourable Kama.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, if I may, firstly, I want to indicate that after this motion, I will have only one motion left as opposed to the two, as one of the motions I wanted to move has already been moved by the Chief Whip of the opposition. If I may then, Deputy Speaker.
You may proceed. Noted. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker, I move a motion on behalf of the ANC without notice. That this House notes 3 suspects were caught with 4 million rand illegal drugs in an Elsis River roadblock and lauds the police for pushing drug sellers back. I so move.
Thank you, Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Sayed.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, I don't have any motions left, Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
No problem. Then I hand back to Honourable Kama, who will deliver his last motion.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the People's Organization, the African National Congress, I move a motion without notice that this House notes 2 people were shot and killed and their bodies dumped next to the Baden-Powell Way in Khayelitsha. On Sunday, a man, and on Monday, a woman was found, and calls on the investigators to solve these matters. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honourable Members, that brings us to the end of motions without notice. I would now like to deliver two rulings. My apologies, that word just disappeared. On the first ruling, Honourable Members, on the 10th of September 2020, during the debate on Interpellation 3, the Honourable Member Mitchell raised a point of order wanting me to rule on the factual input by Honourable Member Smith. As I did not hear specifically what was said at the time, I undertook to study the Hansard and rule on this matter at a subsequent sitting of the House. It is not for the Chair to determine the accuracy or otherwise of statements made by Honourable Members during a debate, and I therefore cannot make a determination on the intent of Honourable Member as to whether he deliberately misled the House. Should Honourable Mitchell wish to pursue the matter further, he is welcome to utilise the existing process the standing rules provide for. I thank you on that. On the second ruling, during interpellations on the 10th of September 2020, the Honourable Member Mitchell raised a point of order in terms of Rule 59, namely reflections upon members of the House, and requested me to rule on allegations made by Honourable Member Smith. As I did not hear specifically what was said at the time, I undertook to study the Hansard and rule on this matter at a subsequent sitting of the House. During Interpellation 3, Honourable Smith in his speech said the following, and I quote from the Hansard: "The son of MEC Mayor has been appointed as an Assistant Director in the Department of Local Government and Environmental Affairs. MEC Ivan Mayor, as one of the senior cabinet members and a member of the DA's FedEx, enjoys close relations with MEC Bredell as they have served together in the provincial government and in the DA structures for many years. There are reasonable grounds to believe that there are some form of influence in the appointment of his son in MEC Bredell's office department," and I close quotes. The remarks in question reflect negatively upon the character and the integrity of Honourable Minister Mayor and is therefore unparliamentary, and I must therefore ask Honourable Smith to withdraw these remarks. Honourable Smith.
Deputy Speaker, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Honourable Smith.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker, thank you so much.
Honourable Smith? Sorry.
Yes.
Is that you?
Yes, sir. Yes, Deputy Speaker.
You may proceed.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. I hereby withdraw the remarks as requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Smith. I really appreciate that. The sitting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Very honorable, very honorable.
Indeed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Humble.
Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mbombo.
Yebo, Putapi.